indulgence, the subcommittee's meeting ran a couple minutes over. So the first order of business is just to recognize that this is American Education Week, and we'll quickly read and then attach to the minutes the proclamation. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to successfully enter society and preserve our nation's founding values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas in the Old Saybrook School District, our mission is to educate and prepare students to achieve their highest aspirations, care for others and the environment, and contribute to a global society by working in partnership with families and the community, and by engaging each learner in a rigorous, personalized, and meaningful education program. Whereas district employees, be they support professionals, teachers, administrators, or substitute teachers, work tirelessly to serve the young people of Old Saybrook with care and professionalism. And whereas schools are community centers, bringing together all community members to work toward the common goal of leading all students to success, be it further proclaimed that the members of the Board of Education express their deep appreciation of our entire education community, students, families, community volunteers, businesses, school district administrators, teachers, parents, and support professionals for their collective effort to make the Old Saybrook School District an amazing place to learn and work. And so we'll attach this to our minutes as well. We now have the audience of citizens section.
During Spirit Week, we did the turkey legs, which was successful for the Interact Club, and then for Field Day was a great day, a lot of positivity. It was really great. My last year having Field Day, it was so positive. Everyone was cheering for each other. There was no negativity, so I think it was just a great positive atmosphere. Seniors did win. And then moving on to sports, girls soccer, they've made it into states. Girls field hockey has made it to states. Boys soccer has made it into states. Boys football, they're doing great, holding their own, definitely playing with a lot of heart. And then the cross country team, they just had their shoreline meet, which was at our course. That went well. And then to touch on Naviance, I know that was a change. And as a senior, I love it. I think it's really helpful. It's helpful for the students to just see everything. It keeps us organized. So for me, it's been really successful, and other students I've talked to, it's also been just a really big success. Yeah, sure. So Naviance, it's this new program that we have that is pretty much how you apply now to college. So you submit your transcript onto Naviance, your teachers submit their recommendations onto Naviance. The school had an orientation with the teachers to discuss and teach them how to upload recommendations on there. And it's just overall, you can see everything that you're submitting. You can clearly see your deadlines, which is really helpful. And if you go on, you can clearly see if there's any supplement essays. So for people applying to colleges, it's been very helpful, and definitely a big supporter of that. So if there's any questions about that, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
So last week we had the PSATs, and as a junior taking it, I believe it was pretty effective. There wasn't really anything troubling with the entire PSAT. Everything ran smoothly and effectively. and it went well. It seemed like everybody knew what to do as we took another PSAT last year. And another thing was Miss Ripples and Miss Ryan's award for the principals. I heard that the middle school also had an assembly where we've all the students celebrated both principals getting the awards. So that was a really great achievement because it's a once in a lifetime award like Miss Virtue said. Another thing was the superintendent and principal advisory committee, in that the people discussed current issues. The prominent one was the turf field, so discussing that, many people sort of found out what was going on and how they can tell others what they can tell others about the situation at the current time. So this past week was a pretty hectic one.
Thanks. As always, a nice job. Are there any questions or comments from the Board of Education? Thank you very much. Karen, any correspondence?
I do have some correspondence. The first is a letter from the program director of the regional vocational agricultural program at Middletown High School, and she is looking for our Board of Education, a couple of representatives to participate in their consulting committee. And the intent is, their task is to advise the operating Board of Education regarding policy, program, services, and procedures related to the regional VOAG program. So there's a date, and it's on the clipboard, so we can look at it and see if there's any interest in that. Okay, we have a note of thanks from Kathy Randall, just acknowledging the wonderful retirement party, just her joy, as she says, and working with all of us, the administrators in the central office for the past 31 years. So for that note, which is on the board, and then we also received, this is an updated it's a suicide prevention little pamphlet that was developed by a committee that was headed up by Heston. I think it's been about 2 years ago, Heston, that we all worked on this. Kathy was part of it. It was made up of a committee, youth and family services, police, counselors from the schools and outside professional counselors. There were a couple of parents that participated. And the objective was to provide information and resources to the community about suicide prevention. So it provides information on warning signs and risk factors and protective factors and things that, and it's a concern. It's an issue in our town, it's in our community. So this has been a good work. And I think it's in the library, it's in the schools, it would be in town hall, counselors' offices throughout the town, and I think surrounding town as well. So that's also on clipboard. I think that's what I have.
Well, there's one more thing, if I could take some indulgence on this. We just learned at the end of last week that, again this year, the Old Saybrook Board of Education is going to be honored by CAVE on November 14th. And this year the Board of Education has gone up yet another level in their honoring and levels of distinction. And this year, you were being honored for being a CAVE Board of Distinction, which means that you have been honored by CAVE for numerous years. This, of course, is on your ability to work with the Board of Education, to communicate, to get things done. And I'm just really happy to be there when your photo was taken at the CAVE meeting last year, and I hope that I'll be able to be there again when as many of you as can gather in Mystic to have it done again this year. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you very much. If the correspondence is done, then the Board of Education regular meeting minutes for October 7, 2014. If I could have a motion to approve. Kelly, seconded by Holly. Trent, did anyone call in any corrections?
The two corrections, there was a spelling correction for the Enrich Foundation, and there was a correction for the meeting time to change from 7 p.m. to 7:30.
So we corrected the name of the foundation, and we'll talk about in a minute, we've changed our meeting times till back to 7:30 to accommodate the Board of Finance. And so with those two corrections noted, are there any comments or corrections now from the Board of Education? Hearing none, if there's no more discussion on the minutes, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. They're passed. We have a couple of short items first, and I'll call on Jan for the budget goals for 15-16.
Yep, and I'll ask Julie to help me, but Julie Pendleton, there's a brief report about the budget season starting, which we mentioned at the last board meeting, and you have a calendar that was posted of all of the major signposts in the budget calendar season, which, as you know, starts in October and ends in May, so it's pretty much almost the full extent of the academic year. At this point, budget creation is in the hands of individual teachers and administrators and program directors. And then mid-November, the program directors and administrators will bring their proposals to Julie and me, and we will sit with each of them individually, and then we get together with the district leadership as a team, and we process those together. The process that we use, remember, is zero-base. You start from zero each year, and you move forward in that way, and we ask that at the building level and even at the teacher level that they create priorities so that if we have to make decisions about making cuts to recommendations and suggestions made by teachers, we know that we are cutting in the level that they prioritize, not in any way arbitrary. It does go on to say, of course, that 80% of our entire budget, is in salary and benefits. And in addition, we have special education expenses, tuition expenses, transportation expenses, and the rest keep into the other items like utilities, textbooks, supplies, and materials. Julie, is there anything you want to add?
That's pretty much where we're at this point in time.
We're at the very beginning.
Any comments or questions from the board at this point? All right, just two quick notes on the 15-16 board meeting calendar. As I just mentioned, we have adjusted our meetings to start back at 7:30. This is to accommodate the fact that the Board of Finance starts their meetings at 7 o'clock, and Julie and Jan and Joanne, for that matter, are invited to the Board of Finance to make periodic or actually regular reports on the budget of the Board of Education, and so we wanted to make it easier for them to do that. The second thing is that we have talked about restoring one or more meeting nights that had been traditionally meetings of the Board of Education, and we have talked about having them be committee meetings. We're looking at restoring them so there will be more meetings of the Board of Education. Just a couple of quick notes, because most of this will really impact the spring time, and we'll talk about that in a second. Given the election next Tuesday, the 4th, not next Tuesday, but Tuesday the 4th of November, which would typically be our next meeting, we don't have Board of Education meetings historically. We've not had them on election nights. So that would move our next meeting to be the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And we are, at this point, it looks like we have a quorum, and it looks like we're going to restore that meeting. We typically wouldn't be before the Tuesday before, hold on a second, Thanksgiving, but it's an election year, so it throws our first and third, Tuesdays off.
I think I just misunderstood. I was going to correct it and say that it's November 11th for next meeting, but you weren't saying that it wasn't.
No, I was saying
Thank you.
we won't meet on the 4th,
Right.
which would have been. So we will meet on as you can see here, on the 11th, which is typically not a night we would meet, and that throws our next meeting until the 25th. And typically we wouldn't meet right before Thanksgiving, but it's an election year, so it throws our schedule off a little bit. So at this point in time, we're talking about board meetings on November 11th and November 25th. So the election throws us off a little bit, so just to be mindful of that. I also would like the Board of Education members to look at look at the calendar that we had previously proposed for the spring, where we had at least one or two meeting times that were going to be, they were noticed as potential committee meetings. We're looking at restoring those to full board meeting. We're not going to necessarily have a long discussion about this tonight. We've got time to make those decisions, but take a look at the original spring schedule, because we are gonna really be trying to restore those meetings and have more full board meetings in the spring. Any comments or questions about it at this point? It's really more informational right now, we don't have to take any action right now. Before December 1st, is it? Trent, when do we have to notify the town clerk of our? December 1st. So we have to do this in November because we have a deadline of December 1st to notify the town clerk of what our meeting schedule is going to be for the calendar year. We actually set our meetings up on the academic year, but what we have to notify the town clerk, who then sends it to the Secretary of State, is our calendar year schedule. So we'll actually have to do the whole schedule for the next calendar year, and I just wanted people to remember that we're looking to restore more board meetings. Yeah, George?
So just for clarification, the only date we're really talking about then is January 20th? That's
Well-
one day, right? Because all the other ones.
Well, that was your recommendation, so is
I
that the only
appreciate
thing we're
the
talking
document
about?
they're talking about, because all the other ones are unusual.
Right, based on this.
Well, no, we had talked about whether we were gonna move the superintendent's, that's what I'm asking people to consider. So we have nights that are made for superintendent's evaluation, nights that are board self-evaluation. And what we've been discussing is not having those events occur on those nights and have those be board meetings, and that's what I want the board to educate. So it's 1, 2, or potentially 3 Tuesday nights that are on the table.
Right, the conversation, the other factor we'll be sensitive to is, when we have some Jen come out basically every week.
So those are the factors that we weigh when we make decisions on that. All right, thank you, George. At this point, I would like to, if there's no objection from members of the board, we've got a couple of agenda items that involve some of our faculty and potentially some students. I don't think I see other students here, but faculty. And what I'd like to do is, if there's no objection, is move to the items that involve our faculty to make presentations, and then we'll return to the track and turf field update. I just out of courtesy, so board members, if there's no objection. All right, hearing none. Can we hear about the music field trip to New York first?
I don't know if you have copies of the letter and request form. Last year, it was last April, the York High School Chamber Singers from York, Maine came to Old Saybrook on their way to New York City in an exchange concert with us here with the Shuttle Choir, Chamber Singers, and Men's Chorus. That was really beneficial to them because they got to work with Rob Westerberg, who was one of my mentors from when I was in high school. They did clinics with him, we did a combined number, and also got to perform for each other. He has invited us to travel to York to do the same kind of thing there with Brunswick High School, which is another high school that's just north of York. What we would do is leave Friday morning, April, it's up here somewhere. Yes, April 10th. Leave that morning, travel up, spend some time with them rehearsing, having Rob work with our chamber singers, having me work with his chamber singers, as well as Ashley Smith, she's the director at Brunswick High School. She would be working with them also, have time to rehearse on our own, and then some time to rehearse together so that we can come together and collaborate on probably 3 or 4 pieces. From there, we'd have dinner together. They'll provide the dinner. Social event probably after the concert so they can get to know each other. We would stay in hotels for students to a room. I'll create the room assignments so as to make sure that everybody's getting along. And then we would depart. Right, yeah. They've already been told. I'm the one that's
switch
making
them
the
several
rules.
times throughout the trip.
Right, exactly. Then on the way back on Saturday, the plan is to stop in Boston, have lunch at Quincy Market, and do some kind of cultural experience in Boston. I'd like to take them to see a show. I'm not sure what that'll be yet because that calendar's not out, but that's the plan. We get back Saturday evening, April 11th.
Jen?
I just want to add, Jeremy Milton's done a great job, and I know you all know Jeremy Milton, so I'll say his name anyway. He's done a great job of putting together the details with the ratio of chaperones, with the cost, so it's a 10-to-1 ratio. The cost is $250 per student, and I really appreciate it. They've gone out of their way to determine, while students are in Boston, that they'll be split into 3 groups, that they'll be given specific instructions, because of course keeping an eye on students, no matter how old they are, in a big city is a challenge, and they're pretty experienced at this sort of thing. And so Ms. Riffle and I bring this to you in the hopes that you'll be able to support it.
Right, so at this point, any discussion on items of the board? We can act on it tonight. You can prefer it to the next meeting if you want to. But is there any discussion right now or questions for Mr. Milton? George? Holly?
Yes, I mean, I attended the conference they gave in April, and looking out here, they were phenomenal. It was great experience for them and the students here.
Holly? And Eileen?
My question just was, I know we do certain trips every 4 years, I think, for the whole courses.
That has changed, actually. A couple of years ago, we decided that the cost kind of outweighed the benefits of the big trips every 4 years. So what we've been doing is taking smaller trips more frequently for kids who are interested. What we've done the past 3 years is take kids to New York to see the Philharmonic or an opera or a Broadway show, something like that, once or twice a year, and that makes the cost go down. They're not overnight trips anymore, and it doesn't. What was happening before is if we were going and performing, there was a lot of pressure on kids that maybe couldn't afford the $400 or $500 that it costs for a trip. And if you say I take my chamber singers and none of my tenors can afford to go, we don't have very much performing. So what we decided to do was do this, kind of stick with this model, and I think that's providing a better experience for them.
So will kids have another trip? Because this sounds like it's just chamber singers.
This is just chamber singers, and we are planning another trip to see the Verdi Requiem of the New York Philharmonic in January. This is something that we're looking at right now.
Eileen?
I was going to say, number one, I appreciate it, including in the memorandum was the funding for kids who necessarily can't afford to be able to attend. And I also appreciate Holly's comment, because we've been really working to make sure that all students in the Saybrook High School get a chance to, be a part of the arts experience, regardless of necessarily cost, but more importantly, equity. Because I think it happened actually one time in the middle school, they had sort of a plan, and then all students went, and then all of a sudden, they didn't get to go sometimes, so they're just probably following up on that to make sure that everybody gets to go sometime in a 4-year experience.
Yeah, and that's really important to us too, that everything we plan, and talking to Ms. Ripple, we always do whatever we can to make sure that all kids can go and the cost isn't a deterrent.
Other questions? Sure, go ahead, please.
So I'm in treble choir, and last year it was a great experience working with other kids from a different school. And also, it was great to, I know a lot of my fellow peers had some of the students sleep over, and they still keep in contact. So it was a great experience to not only work with other students from a different choir, but it was also just a bonding experience for the students.
Thank you. Other comments from members of the board? If it's the board's, if the board's pleasure to do it, then someone should move it. So Karen's moving it, seconded by Kelly. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? So it's unanimous. Thank you very much, and enjoy the trip.
Thank you very much.
Why don't we see if we can quickly do the unified, not quickly, give it the time that it deserves, but it's only on the agenda for 10 minutes each, the unified sports program and the wrestling cooperative. If it's possible to take those up, this would be the time to do it. Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I think we have a number of people who are going to speak on this.
Okay.
We have Tim Payne here, Jeff Morey, Sheila Riffle, and John Estafio, Mandy Ryan, Matt Walton, all have a component of this. The Unified Sports Program is something that I am excited to see coming before this Board of Education, and I'm excited that our new athletic extracurricular director and some teachers are bringing this to us. That makes me very pleased, and I'm going to let them tell you what it's about.
So Unified Sports, if you're not familiar with this program, it came out of Special Olympics. And it's a athletic program based for the special needs population of the schools. Started looking around, and we actually met with the CIAC directors of Unified Sports. They came to our school, we had a sit down with them. And we're thinking about trying out this pilot for 1 year. Some of the things that go on with this, it is an unbelievable opportunity for all the kids in the school, not just our special needs populations, at all of our levels. One of the things it does, they require I still don't know the word, it's a sponsor of a regular ed student that will actually play with them.
They're called a partner. There's athletes are the special ed kids, and the partners are the regular ed kids helping them out.
And the partners do not necessarily need to be an athlete. It is also another great way to get other kids in the school involved in one of our programs. It supports our district strategic plan of 3 social and emotional needs, and number 5 of character education. It provides an opportunity for the athletic participation of our special needs population. It definitely promotes our goal of 100% participation. And again, it goes into that. It doesn't need to be another athlete. It can be another regular ed student. It helps build school climate. It's one of those populations that everyone rallies around. And it's one of you can combine it, say we were doing a basketball program. It's a quick game that would happen at halftime or in between the JV and a varsity game for 5 minutes. And it's one of those populations that we all have our cliques of the athletes and this clique and that clique. And it's that one clique that everyone will rallies around. And I think it's a very neat concept because of that. It also promotes citizenship. It really gives our kids some ownership of our school. And if you've ever been to one of these events, the amount of pride that goes into that. I mean, there's probably no other, when you talk about a positive atmosphere, there's very few other events I can think of that trump this, and you talk about a positive experience and a positive atmosphere. We are slated for a $2,000 grant from the CIAC for this for the first year. That's at the high school level and at the middle school level. And it's a step-down program from there, and I think I have the numbers right, $1,500 year 2, $1,000 in year 3. There are some other expenses involved in it. Basically a season, it's not a full season like it would be for a 20-game season. It's really 2 or 3 events. It's 2 events and then a tournament. So it becomes a very short season. They require uniforms and a banner. The banner would be a one-time cost. Uniforms in the first year would be a one-time cost, and then a coach's stipend. Tim Payne has helped me immensely getting this going. He has volunteered to coach, and he actually has a lot of experience previously with doing unified sports.
Before I was a teacher here in Old Saybrook, I was in Montville High School, and we did unified sports there, so I helped them out there. And I've also been a head high school basketball coach, so I have the background for both sides. And as most of you guys probably know, I am a special education teacher at the high school, so that's why it's real important to me.
So we're doing a 1-year pilot with the hopes that we will be able to continue this on year 2, 3, and beyond to help cover the costs of this program. I think it's an invaluable asset to our entire school district. We also have the option, if there's 4 or 5 children and we don't have enough, we have the option of co-oping or tri-oping with another school district, Westbrook, Old Line, to get the number that we need.
Any questions from the board members, Eileen?
Yeah, this is the first time I've actually heard about an unified sport program, but I am involved in this field of special education. So what kind of students, and maybe Kathy maybe has more experience with this, would be involved in a program like this that wouldn't ordinarily be able to participate in a regular sports program here in October?
Well, it's typically our students who might be in our life skills program who wouldn't join one of our teams. They just wouldn't feel like they could participate. And they have these partners, and so and there's different levels of
4 or 5?
Some where they're pretty independent, somewhere and it goes all the way to you have someone who really runs with you and does everything with you. So there's an opportunity for anyone to participate. So, we've already sat down and talked about which students this might be, and it does go perfectly with our goal of getting everyone participating from extracurricular.
I can speak to the climate, having come from a district that had a very successful unified sports program. I'll give you a quick example. We had an assembly and a young lady, special needs, decided to do a taekwondo routine in front of the entire school. And there wasn't a dry eye in place. And the kids that rallied around, it does touch across, all cliques, all. And what I've witnessed in a short time at Old Saybrook High School is we have that culture, and we're just building on a fantastic foundation of care.
And there's only 4 possible sports that you can do. It's soccer, track and field, basketball, and volleyball. They do have kind of a program that you can do bowling, but it's not unified sports really. It's just everyone going bowling every once in a while. But those are the 4 main groups, the 4 main sports that you can do. And each one that you choose has a cost of about $2,000 per sport. The first year we're going to try to do only one, obviously, because you want to see how it goes and how it benefits all the kids.
Any other questions from the board, Karen?
So do you partner kids, different grade levels together, and how do you select the partners? Or do the kids volunteer? How does that all come to be?
It would probably be a volunteer aspect, and if we have an abundance, which we might, maybe we can, other schools I know have done essays to see how kids can get involved and why they want to get involved, different opportunities. It could be different. 10 kids do basketball, and if we do another sport later on in the future, in a year or two, maybe we get 10 different kids to do track and field. So it all depends, but it's volunteer for them and everything else, so it's just a great opportunity. So.
And we do have experience with that because our kids have participated in, it's called buddy soccer, buddy track, buddy basketball, and that's a partner thing. But it's not part of our school. You know, we've been combining with local towns. And we've been going to Westbrook to play soccer, to Valley to do track. But this would be part of our own community, which is nice.
With our Best Buddies program at the middle school, we often have a lot of students who want to be Best Buddies, and we've had to develop a system where we actually interview our students, and we have rubrics for each of the questions, and we really looked at those, and then we choose the students that we feel are the most qualified to do that. So it's a good opportunity for the student to have the interview experience as well. It's something that I'd like to see continue in this manner, but if there's too many.
You know, next question.
Just a couple of questions. What sports did you want to?
I think this first year at the high school level, we would like to do basketball because it's in March, so that we don't have to jump on something right away, so it gives us time. Also, I've been approached by a couple of females that would like to do their senior project along to coincide with this. So that also is one of the reasons, because one of them is a female basketball player.
Now, do you hope that these sports mirror the other sports that are going on, soccer being played during soccer season and baseball?
They set up the times when everything happens, but it does mirror it. The one thing is that the partner, the regular ed student, cannot be a part of that sport. So for instance, if we do basketball, I cannot have a freshman JV or varsity basketball player helping out with them. It has to be someone else. Now, it can be a JV or varsity soccer player because it's kind of out of season, but we can't have one of the athletes that is in season.
And it doesn't have to be an athlete at all.
Oh, true. Sorry.
I just want to clarify, at the middle school, we have a number of students who this would apply to, so we really want to see what the interest level is with our students, whether it be basketball or track, so we can include as many students as possible. So I don't want to commit to basketball at the middle school level,
Yes.
but really looking at what the interest is for our students.
And how many different, that's one of the things, how many different unified sports teams are there for you to compete against? I mean, in
We're
this area?
like one of 38 school districts that do not have it.
We're in the minority.
Yes. So we're behind the ball a little bit, and we'll like to jump up and get with them.
Kelly, and then
I just wanted to say thank you for doing your research and bringing this into our district and bringing the proposal forward and all the thought that you put into how it aligns with all our strategic plan and our goals for the district, I think it's absolutely amazing. So I guess my question is, what are we, it says promotion requested, what are we looking for tonight?
You want to move it?
I'd like to move it.
So there's a motion, is there a second? Kelly's moving it, seconded by Karen. Further discussion, Eileen?
Yes, so a question, you were saying it's, my question is the interest inventory on the sport that's being chosen, is it actually the interest inventory of the special needs players, or how does, where is it? Because that's my thought, is that you're asking those students for their interest, not necessarily the buddy's interest or the buddy's of the other person. So, yeah, I'm just asking. And how do you get that info?
So that's going to be done at the middle school level, and we will actually be working with the special education teachers who work with those students, and we'll share the program, and then, again, have them choose who's interested in what and make a decision from there. We have a bigger population of students who would qualify for this at the middle school level than we carries at the high school level, so we may have more participants.
And the families that are also made aware of this opportunity so that they can encourage, their child to participate.
Yes, absolutely.
I think if you present it at a middle school level, you're not gonna lose as many kids later on, because once they do the honors, you may have lost them, so we'll want to participate.
George?
You'll have to, St. John's.
I'm sorry, will we
Well,
open this up?
they
to
don't
St. John?
tend to have that population, but we could. They don't have students of this disability tend to not be at St. John's. Is that what you mean, or the partners?
I think we also need to, because we are entering into a one-year contract with CIAC, I think we need to look at the language of that too. So I'm not sure we can answer that question right now. The reason for bringing it here tonight was because we had a bit of a deadline with CIAC to accept the one-year grant. It is only a one-year pilot. We do not have to be committed after that. We are hoping it will be successful. We hope we will continue this relationship, and that eventually maybe coming to the board and saying we'd like some funds to continue this program, because you can see it's a step-down grant. But there is money this year. We think we can put something together, pilot it, offer students a wonderful opportunity, and maybe also iron out any kinks that we have with it, and make it an even better, bigger, smoother project, and start at the beginning of the year next year.
Motion and second, and no further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're still, at least one of you still up for the wrestling cooperative, and I think we can do this also too.
Oh, me. You have all the numbers.
We're a team.
I'll stand up here.
While they're getting set up, we have wrestling right now as a program. What you see here is a bit of a change, because we're in a cooperative with Westbrook, as we are with football. But we're asking for a bit of a change in the program. We have more interest in wrestling in our school this year, and we're asking to change the relationship a little bit so we can keep this program going. Again, part of our 100% involvement. Take it away.
Sheila Brown's causing trouble because she asked for demonstration. I've never wrestled, so we're not going to provide that for you this
Could
evening.
make sports center though.
Yeah, right, that's true. Basically, as Jan said, for the past several years, we have exchanged a co-op with Westbrook. We sponsor our cooperative team in football. They sponsor our cooperative team in wrestling. My understanding is that for quite some time there was some level involvement from both schools in the wrestling program. However, the involvement of and interest of Westbrook has diminished over the years. So I was asked by the previous principal of Westbrook High School last spring if we would consider taking on the sponsorship of wrestling, because we continue to have currently, I believe, in grades 10 through 12, about 8 students who would look to continue with the wrestling program, where they in grades 10 through 12 at the time of spring last year had 1 student who would be continuing. So it was becoming difficult for them to continue sponsoring that co-op. So in a conversation with the principal, I had said, yes, we would certainly take a look at that. We applied for that co-op to be changed around to us being the host school and then being our cooperative team, and that was approved by the CIAC. So at this point in time, for us to move forward, we are looking at any kind of alternative that we can come up with to fund being the host school for the wrestling program. We may have other students interested we have decided not to move forward with anything in terms of an informational meeting or trying to find out how many freshmen we might have involved in the wrestling program until we presented this to you here at the Board of Education. So, I don't know if you add anything to that.
No, at the present moment, except for members.
So the questions and comments, George?
In regards to Julie,
So in the past, the arrangement we've had has gone from 50% on each side, participation and cost, to, in fact, I looked up all the old invoices to see where we fluctuated. We actually, last year had 80-20. We were 80% of the cooperation, and the Westbrook was 20%. Last numbers we had before tonight were like 75%, 75-25. So will it work? We have been participating and paying for, for most of this along the way anyway. And in looking at the numbers, projecting out what our expenses would be, the cost of a coach, the cost of renting the Y, which is where they practice, the transportation, and miscellaneous supplies and materials that the program would need, brought us around just under 16,000, 15, a little over 16. And so, we're looking at 75% of that cost being ours, 12. I'm going off the top of
12,093.
Okay, a little over 12,000, and that's about $2,100 more than we paid in the prior year. So, it's not a whole lot different. It's fluctuated, like I said, from year to year. So, it just is a matter of we're the host now versus Westbrook being the host.
And my budgeting was a bit of a moving target because you pay per student. So I'm not sure what was originally budgeted, even when we put that final point on it. But the money's there. There are a couple of stipended positions that have gone unfilled. So there's money there. Of course, this would mean we don't have this stipend in our contract. So after discussing this here, we do need to speak with OSCA about putting a stipend in the contract, at least for this year, and then we see where it goes after that.
John, why do we not have the space or the?
Yeah, we have looked at, when we first started with wrestling, we looked at every option possible. Gym space where they could practice, basketball's going on obviously during the same season. So both middle school and high school have basketball teams. High school has a lot of night games. Middle school doesn't have the night games, but what that would do is push all the wrestling practices, and of course competitions don't take place in the evening. But it would have pushed, if they use the middle school, pushed all of their practices to evening.
Would there be practice space in the Baker weight room area?
No, not sufficient for, without moving, and that's the same issue at the middle school. There's a very large mat you have to roll out, which would have to be rolled out every night and rolled up every evening and put back and out of the way. So logistically, it's tough. Most schools that have wrestling, schools that I've been involved in prior to Old Saybrook, had, auxiliary gyms or separate spaces where this could take place, and that's not the case here. We are really, short on gym space, and the elementary school is small, and it would be difficult for them. They could possibly do some practicing, but again, the mat would be in their way. They use that gym for a multi-purpose venue. So there were just such difficult, space issues.
Utilizing the line?
About $5,000. It depends.
About 3,000 you had in this, do you think that's maybe a little bit off from what you sent me?
What was it? I'm sorry?
You'd put 3,000 in rental.
Then what I pulled that from was last year's fee, which
Okay.
was just, at one point, they charged us a little bit more because we had quite a large number of participants, and they were there longer. So last year's fee, I think I pulled that off of the most recent one, which was around $3,000.
George, do you have a question? Eileen?
I was going to say, being a comprehensive high school as we are, we always, I think, in prior years have always partnered with other schools. So I remember we had partnered, I think, with the swim team, because there were maybe one or two students that really wanted to
Right.
participate. So my question is that this launches, which is, sounds like it will, and it's pretty exciting. Your experience in terms of other shoreline communities that do wrestling? So, you know, might we be able to gain in student participation and funds based on other shoreline communities that are interested in wrestling but don't have a program?
I'm not sure for this year, in terms of entering, bringing a third school into a co-op, we would need to apply for that at the beginning of the year, we would need to get that interest. Certainly something we can take a look at for the future. I also want to actually,
Or constitute a team, though, and that's how.
right, so if you have, yeah, that's right, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but if you have 4 wrestlers at a school, then you're your own team. You can't participate in, that's not your own, is it? That's what I want you to speak to, it's not on your own.
If you're 4-year-old, if we had 3 wrestlers, we could go, in essence, if Valley had a team, we could go with them. And they would find their own way there. They would wrestle 4 Old Saybrook, but they would just go and compete with the Valley team. We actually have some swimmers who do that. Once we get to 4, we are now our own team. But as you said, to alleviate the cost, that's why we co-op with Westbrook, is to, so we have a more complete team. And that just helps alleviate a whole bunch of different items for that. So once we get to 4, that's the magic number.
I'm going to have us stop the discussion now. Jan, informing me that this is really informational at this point. It's not noted for a motion tonight. But you're going to get more information. We're just getting a sense of the board and getting some questions out there. So this can come back to us in the 11th meeting, formal action.
And what they'd like to do is be able to put out feelers now for, can we get a coach? Can we start the conversation about a memorandum to get a stipend? You know, can we get enough students involved? Let's find out how many freshmen we have, that they can get all of that going, and then we will bring it back on the 11th for you. Okay?
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now we're going to go back to the agenda item, the turf track and tennis court update. And we have Phil Broadhurst here as co-chair, and I know we've got a number of members of the subcommittee of the board, and I know Scott as co-chair from the Board of Selectmen as well as here. Jan, you may want to open up this discussion and introduce our guest, Attorney O'Brien.
I will certainly do that. We do have a few more teacher presentations this evening on Captain CMT, the science test, and a vocabulary pilot. I didn't know if it's the board's wish to do that after the turf, or
Well, how long is it going to take?
that's good.
10 minutes, please.
10 minutes apiece. I mean, all right, if you'd like to. We have, the attorney here, we've got
Right.
other guests, so
Okay.
maybe.
We can do the turf first.
Okay,
Yeah.
why don't we do this and
Okay.
just see how long
And
it's
then
going to take?
And then we'll go to the teachers. Right, so we've, just prior to this meeting, we had a turf track and tennis court meeting. The meeting was called because, as Attorney O'Brien will tell you, we have reached a point in the progress or lack thereof, where we feel that the 3T committee needed to be able to give enough information to make a recommendation to the Board of Education about how to proceed next. And at this point, I'm going to ask Attorney O'Brien maybe to sort of summarize what was discussed at that meeting.
Thank you very much, Jan. My name's Bob O'Brien. I'm an attorney with Shipman & Goodwin in Hartford. I have been a practicing construction lawyer in Connecticut since 1979. I have never had the pleasure of representing the town of Old Saybrook in a construction matter, which is probably a good thing for the town. But I do want to say at the outset, and I'll keep my remarks brief, much more brief than they were earlier this evening. But I do want to say that you as a board and as a community have been extraordinarily well served by Jan and by Julie. In particular, I've worked most closely with those two people from the town staff, from the education department. And they're knowledgeable, they're smart, they're articulate, they listen, they ask the right questions. So I want you to have a real sense of reassurance that you've got the right people involved in this project. As Jan said, we are unfortunately at a stalemate. We have a contractor who is pointing the finger at our consulting engineering firm. And we have two representatives from the firm here this evening. And on the other side of the coin, we have our consulting engineering firm assuring us that the design for this turf field project is appropriate and adequate. For probably a number of reasons, the stone drainage base that would lay underneath the turf field is not testing out properly. It's not draining properly. And it also has some problems in terms of its gradation, that is the actual physical makeup of the stone layers that would lay underneath the turf field. As recently as October 15th, which is 6 days ago, the contractor wrote to the town and said, we're willing to remove the entire base material and replace it, provided that you give us a change order for $280,000. That, needless to say, is unacceptable to us. We have received assurances, written assurances from our consultant, who in turn had obtained advice from a third-party consultant about the validity of the design. And we're at the point now where we feel that there are only a few alternatives available to us. This field was supposed to have been done in September. I was asked to get involved on September 22nd. My goal, as soon as I learned about what was going on, was to try to get you a field as quickly as possible, perhaps during October. If that failed, then during November. I would be doing you all a disservice if I said to you that you're going to have a field in November. In all likelihood, you will not, which is very unfortunate, and I recognize the frustration in the community about that. Nevertheless, I think that the shared belief on the part of your town representatives is that we want a field, we want a project that is done correctly. We're not going to sacrifice that for the sake of expediency. I recognize that creates a hardship for some of your student athletes, for your teams, for parents of those children. But in the long run, I think that you're spending a lot of money on this project. It needs to be done right. So at the earlier meeting this evening of the subcommittee, a motion was unanimously approved to recommend to this board that the appropriate course of action would be to move under a particular section of our contract. It happens to be section 2.4, which doesn't mean anything unless I put it in context. But basically, it gives the town the right to provide a 10-day written notice period to this contractor to correct the deficiencies in the turf field base. We do have to get prior approval from our consulting engineer to do that. I suspect that will not be a problem. Should the contractor fail to begin correcting the work and proceed diligently with its correction within that 10-day period, that particular section of the contract gives the town the right to then make its own arrangements to have that portion of the project performed by somebody else. It doesn't mean that we're terminating the contract of the existing contractor. It means essentially that we're removing this portion of the work from that contractor's scope and giving it to somebody else to finish. In conjunction with that, the contract provision allows you to, as a town, to issue what's called a deduct change order to the contractor, which essentially would remove for a stated value the work that's going to be performed by somebody else, so that you don't pay twice for it. This is the clause that the subcommittee approved, at least a motion, which would essentially authorize, the motion recommends to this board that the board authorize the appropriate steps to be taken under section 2.4. We have to be very careful. This is a almost $2 million contract. It's 50 some odd pages long. You can't just make decisions without very carefully looking at the contract language, but it's language that I have had a lot of experience with over the years. I'm familiar with it. I believe I understand the way our court system will look at it. In my judgment, this is an appropriate way to proceed rather than some of the more severe steps, such as terminating the contractor's contract at this point in time, which creates a whole host of issues that likely will result in a more expensive project for you and one that will not be finished anytime soon. So, in a nutshell, that's where we are. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have. We also have, as I mentioned, two representatives from BSC, our consulting engineering firm, here with us tonight as well. So I'll leave it open to the floor.
Phil, would you like to read the motion? Well, you don't need to read the motion yet. Just on any general discussion, would you like to add any other information from the subcommittee? I mean, I think we're keeping it pretty straightforward here, but then I would open it up for board members to discuss. Is that sufficient?
A member of the board, or a couple board members were at that.
I think 7 were at the opening session.
So, no, I think the subcommittee was pretty clear and just unanimously approved the motion. So board members,
Let me ask Jan, you want to add something right now?
I
and
just
then we'll
wanted,
do board member questions.
just to do the full triple T project, I know we are all very focused on the turf field and for very good reason. But I do want to say that the tennis courts have proceeded, and work has been done on those, right up to, I was up there this morning when I saw that the surface has been done, and I think what's left to be done, and the engineers can correct me if I'm wrong, is to finish up some of the fencing, and just put the finishing touches on the tennis court that has moved forward. The track hasn't moved forward because of its proximity to the turf field. So that's the rest of the triple T report.
Questions?
So Veronica, it seems like the contractor will comply with the request, that temporary request. And if they feel they have no fault in this matter, legally, are we setting ourselves up for further action against them?
Well, there are.
I'm not sure how this is going to play out, I guess.
Karen, there are established procedures set forth in the contract for pursuing a claim. I think that in an ideal world, what should have happened here is that the contractor who has now been provided with information that his base is deficient, it is not in accordance with the contract requirements, should have taken the appropriate steps to have redone that work. And then if it felt that the reason that the base was deficient was not due to its own work, but was due to the design, it had the opportunity to preserve a claim and make that claim in accordance with the contractual procedures that are described. For a number of reasons, the most important of which is probably a financial one. The contractor has not indicated a willingness to follow those procedures at this point in time. It has instead, as I mentioned, sought a very large change order from the town, and even prior to that October 15th letter, there were overtures from the contractor about a shared approach to the cost involving the contractor, the town, and our consulting engineer. And that was an overture that also did not strike us as very attractive.
You go.
Two questions.
the amount of the deductible?
There is not at this moment. That is an issue that BSC is working on to give us an appropriate number.
And the risk of this deductible, what is the risk of future projects of this contractor completing timely or without errors?
You mean if the existing contractor stays on the job?
To complete the tennis courts are being completed
Right.
now, but after the turf is done, it's done by another contractor, and this goes out the way, say it may. What's the risk of the same contractor coming back and finishing something that they're
Well,
good experience? I mean, it's sort of unique. We have three different phases here, and for them to come back after they've been, sort of thrown off of one project, that we're going to come back to this. What is the risk or the benefit of having them come back to do the same project?
this particular contractor does not have a bad reputation. It is a contractor who's been around for quite a while. His experience is more in the area of highway and road construction. I'm not so sure how much experience it has in turf field installation, but for whatever reason, they've had difficulty with this one. That does not mean that they cannot finish the construction, nor need to remove the base from their scope. And nor does it mean they can't finish the track ultimately. Part of the problem with the track is seasonal. We're at a point now where the track manufacturer, the track supplier, is telling us that the temperatures at night are right at the borderline of being acceptable for purposes of installing the track and using the materials that they need to do that. So that's why I'm if we were living in San Diego, I might say something different, but we're not, and it's unlikely that the track, it doesn't really make sense for the track to be installed now when we have a question about the weather conditions. So it's probably going to have to be deferred to the spring. Any questions? George?
I think that with Karen, that I don't see how contractor will accept the kind of and I would think that if I was a contractor, I would think I would like to know what the deduct value would be again part of they're saying that they would be through this with $200,000. And you're saying deduct is $350, very literally out in the middle. I'm not so sure how that would play out as well. So I'd like to see how this scenario can get paid out. So there's good much of known in terms of and even they accepted that. I'm not convinced that they couldn't do it right the first time. One makes us think that they had the ability to do it right the first time. It'd be a shame for them to learn how to do this.
Your points are well taken. I do not know exactly what it would cost the town if the present contractor decides not to finish. However, the one lesson that is important to emphasize tonight is that in these contracts, you have to be very careful that you follow the procedures that are set forth in the contract. So the 10-day notice is a contract requirement. We have to give that, unless we decided to go in an entirely different direction and just terminate this contract. I commented on that earlier. I don't know, George, what they're going to do. I just don't know. I don't know how they would react to the 10-day notice. We think maybe think we know, but until it happens, we can't say with certainty. So I think that we give them this opportunity, which is in the nature of, I think, acting in good faith, which is what you always want to do. You want to give somebody the opportunity to correct a problem that they've created, rather than, perhaps take a step that's has more severe consequences for everybody. So I think that the issues you raised, particularly about the cost of the work, the corrective work, are issues that we're trying to work through with our consultant right now so that we get a better handle on this. But from all indications, it is it would appear to be in the $200,000 to $300,000 range, based on what I know at this point, but we don't have hard numbers. Any questions?
Yes, Karen.
Mr. Copeland, Julie, what have we paid the contractor to date?
We've paid 2 requisitions to date. And the total that were certified for the previous work has been a total of $836,617.50.
And leaving what remaining then, just so
Well, it leaves the proposed pay rack and the balance to finish, so a little $850,000.
yes, Vito.
Is this motion that you're looking for just to give this 10-day notice, or are you piggybacking off of what you said, and I'll go ahead? I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but we don't know what the numbers are. We can fix it, we don't even know if there's a contract, we can touch it now.
So Attorney O'Brien's provided us with an appropriate motion, so why don't I read the language? We don't have to move it or anything, but just to motion that the Board of Education authorize the appropriate steps be taken under section 2.4 of the construction contract between, I believe it's between the Old Saybrook Board of Education, it says Town Education Department, but we'll check the contract.
It actually says
Town
of Old Saybrook, Education Department.
Okay, so we'll do it that way. Town of Old Saybrook Ed Department, and Guerrera Construction Company, including but not limited to the issuance of a 10-day written notice to the contractor to commence and continue the correction of the deficient stone drainage base after having obtained the approval to do so from BSC Group, Inc., and to take further action as may be necessary after the 10-day notice period in accordance with the provisions of section 2.4 of the contract. It would be helpful if you read 2.4 of the contract to the Board of Education, which was done at the earlier meeting as well.
Yes.
It might give you a little bit more detail about what 2.4 means.
It actually closely parrots the language of the proposed motion, but it says, it's entitled, Owner's Right to Carry Out the Work. If the contractor defaults or neglects to carry out the work in accordance with contract documents and fails within a 10-day period after receipt of written notice from the owner to commence and continue correction of such default or neglect with diligence and promptness, the owner may, without prejudice to other remedies it may have, correct such deficiencies. In such case, an appropriate change order shall be issued, deducting from payments then or thereafter due the contractor the reasonable cost of correcting such deficiencies, including owner's expenses and compensation for the architect's additional services made necessary by such default, neglect, or failure. Such action by the owner and amounts charged to the contractor are both subject to prior approval of the architect. And in this case, the architect is defined in the contract as BSC Group, our consulting engineer. If payments then or thereafter due the contractor are not sufficient to cover such amounts, the contractor shall pay the difference to the owner. That's what the clause says.
Other questions? George?
I have a question for the engineer.
Yes, sir, sure.
Is there an issue with, I guess two questions. I mean, what is your sense on the proposal of basically digging up the foundation of the school and resetting it? And then the second question is, are there any issues with doing this late in the season?
Luke McCoy, landscape architect with BSC Group. To answer your first question, we actually proposed 2 remediation plans as a letter back to the Board of Education for the correction here. One being remove the material that is not passing and replace with a suitable material. The second option was replace the drainage type with a drain mat over top of the existing system that's there. Essentially what we would do is take your field base that's under the turf and change it from a stabilized drainage base, turn it into a stabilized base, and add a drainage mat to handle the drainage on top of it. The contractor has come back with that he feels the drainage mat alternate is more expensive and would prefer to remove and replace the material there. So to that extent, to replace the material, obviously, personally, we have some concerns moving forward with the same contractor doing the same work. But again, the goal would be not to use the material that's there and put it back in place in any way. It would be replaced with new material that would be suitable. And the contractor would be responsible for testing and providing all the documentation as was said in the original specifications, which to date we do not have all of that information on the original stone that went in that front. That kind of helps to answer.
Yeah, and I guess the same vein that you will have a problem putting down the track after a certain period of season-wise. Is there some concern for?
The field, which kind of leads to the other, is why we presented 2 options, was because we know that the ability to order, ship, and install the drainage mat would save time overall from removing and replacing the stone material. So that would help to effectively expedite the process slightly, so we gave him that option. With the turf, as far as weather goes, obviously weather is a concern. A couple of things. One is, if we do get a snowstorm that is substantial enough that it stays, they are shut down until the snowstorm. So they could potentially be laying half of the turf and have to stop until the snow melts. As far as the actual installation of the turf and the seams, putting the infill in, as long as it's above freezing temperatures, they can work. The glue is designed to be above 34 degrees and above. The turf and the infill really is a matter of just making sure that it's not freezing together so that they can properly install it. So we have a little bit of a better, not perfect, but a better construction window for the turf installation, whereas with the track, really the cutoff is about 50 degrees overnight. Anything below that we don't want to be entertaining because it's a 2-part mixture of a latex bonding agent and a rubber, and that bonding agent doesn't do well.
Any other questions, Vito?
No, one last one.
Sure.
Again, not to point fingers at all, but we entered into a contract with BSC, correct? Are we, it would be nice if the contractor admitted fault, so it was inferior and report up. Obviously they haven't. So, is this our fight? I'm not sure. And if we give them 10 days to comply and to correct, and now they say, well, the material we put down is what they specified. And then it becomes a battle between the engineer and the contractor. We're still not in that, we're not in that fight. Are we entering a fight that we shouldn't be?
Well, I think the answer to that is driven by contractual relationships. We, as the owner, have a contract with the contractor. There is no contract between the contractor and BSC. We have a contract with BSC for the design services and for what we call contract administration, where they watch the progress of construction. So there really is, legally, there is really no way for the contractor and the engineer to be fighting directly in view of the fact that these contracts exist the way they do. And this is standard. This is nothing unusual.
So at this point, Phil, maybe you want to make the motion that came from your committee?
The Deerfield Subcommittee made the following recommendation that motion that the Board of Education authorize the appropriate steps to be taken under Section 2.4 of the construction contract between the Town of Old Saybrook Education Department and Guerrera Construction Company, including but not limited to the issuance of a 10-day written notice to the contractor to commence and continue the correction of the deficient stone drainage base after having obtained the approval to do so from BSC Group Incorporated, and take further action as may be necessary after the 10-day notice period in accordance with the provisions of Section 2.4 of the contract.
Can you make a motion?
Yes.
Okay, would someone second the motion? Eileen? Is there any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? So that unanimously passes. All right, thank you very much. I don't think we need Attorney O'Brien or BSC, but thank you very much for your time earlier. Thank you very much for your time now, and we'll carry on with the remainder of the agenda. Oh yeah, and the subcommittee members, you can stay for the remainder of our meeting. We'll be here for another couple of hours. No, but I do want to, without all kidding aside, the subcommittee has met several times each month since probably last October or something. It seems like forever. So I want to thank the subcommittee members who spent an awful lot of time monitoring this and working with us to try to get us a remedy to this particular problem. So thank you all very much. All right, so we are back to the agenda, and why don't we take up the matters that do have some more of our faculty here. So we're going to wait one time. Okay, that's fine.
I'm going to beg 30 seconds to put an agenda item out there, and that is, I do want to officially announce that we have two principals who have won a really prestigious award. And I want to do that before we lose our teachers, before they go home, which I know you probably are thinking tomorrow morning is going to come awfully early, and I appreciate that. But I just want to say that we are so proud that for the first time in the history of Cass Connecticut Association of Schools, according to what I was told on the phone on the day that I got the phone call, you probably could have heard the cheering from my closed door office, that two of our principals, our first-year principals, Mandy Ryan from the middle school and Sheila Riffle from the high school, have won the William Cheslakowski Outstanding First-Year Principal of the Year award. This is a state-level award, and as Kevin rightly said, it is a once-in-a-lifetime, and so I just want to publicly congratulate you again. Thank you so much for all the hard work you did last year and for being deserving of your award.
Well deserved, and I just want to reiterate what Jan said. This is unprecedented. It's the first time in the history of the state of Connecticut that the award's gone to two people in the same district at the same time like this. So congratulations from your Board of Education. Yes? Yeah, it's actually, you guys can go home if you want.
Yeah.
So we're now going to take up the vocabulary pilot presentation. I do want to thank you for your time. We're running a little bit over into the earlier one, so we'll take this up now and then we'll get back to the rest of the agenda. So we're going to do the vocabulary pilot presentation first.
So we have two teachers here from the middle school, Dr. Michael Hartman, who is also our middle school English language arts building specialist, and his colleague Courtney Goodale, who is a 6th grade English language arts teacher. And they are going to take us through a presentation on some choices we've made about our vocabulary program. Looking back to 2009 is when we actually started having conversations and taking a deeper look at the program, and they're going to talk to you about some steps that we've taken and where we are currently.
As Heston said, prior to 2009, when we looked at our vocabulary program, it mirrored what our language arts program at the middle school was at the time. And at that time, we were predominantly teaching through core novels, and with those core novels, there were lists of vocabulary words that were somewhat consistent. The last time we had looked at that list, grade to grade, was in 1996. And as time went on and we started to change our curriculum to offer more student choice, to offer more differentiation in the novels that students chose to read, there was more differentiation also in the words and the focus on vocabulary. So we really felt there was a need to have a more consistent program, and so in 2010, we started piloting the Wordly Wise vocabulary program. So beginning after that pilot at the spring of 2010, starting in the 2010-2011 school year, we started doing Wordly Wise in our 4 through 8 school. In grades 6 through 8, students received their own workbook, and they completed all 20 lessons, so 15 words per lesson, that's about 300 words. Grade 4 used the Wordly Wise program as an enrichment for their spelling program, and grade 5 used it in a 5-week cycle, alternating with their spelling program. So students would have 4 weeks of spelling and 1 week of Wordly Wise. They'd be able to do about 5 or 6 lessons a year. So the Common Core state standards came along. I'm sure all of you are aware of that. And some of the language standards, in particular Standard 4, is focused on vocabulary acquisition and use. So in particular, if you look at the breakdown in 4A, 4B, and 4C, 4A focused on using context as a clue to the meaning of a word or phrase. 4B focused on using common grade appropriate Greek and Latin affixes and roots as clues to the meaning of a word. And 4C focuses on students consulting and using a variety of reference materials to help get a precise meaning of words and phrases. So looking at those standards and looking at the program that we had in Wordly Wise, we felt it was really time to put Wordly Wise into review, and so we did that last school year. During that school year, most programs, most grade levels continued to do Wordly Wise as they had in the past, but we also identified as a language arts department and a smaller vocabulary planning group some other programs that we wish to take a look at, and 2 of those programs we identified to put through some of the paces last year were Word Wisdom and Vocabulary from Classical Roots, or VCR, which we usually abbreviate. Okay, so Courtney is going to tell you a little bit about the pilot that was in her 6th grade language arts classroom last year.
Right, so we volunteered to sort of host the pilots, just being sort of that middle grade level at the school. So we broke it down. We started the year with Wordly Wise, and then we shifted. We spent 8 weeks on that, and then we spent 8 weeks with Word Wisdom as our first pilot, and we spent 4 weeks with the VCR, the vocab from classical roots. So we collected data on these different pilots and programs in a variety of ways. We documented student performance, and we actually surveyed the students and also the parents. So that was how we were finding out how others were feeling about the experience as well. We informed parents of the pilot by a letter that was distributed at parent-teacher conferences. It was also sent home through language arts classes, and that was sent from Dr. Harton and Heston and Mandy, I believe, or Mrs. Ryan. And then at the end, when we finished all the pilots, we solicited parent feedback via email. So we had fantastic results from the Word Wisdom over the others. And what we really noticed was student grades were highest on the post-tests. Pre-test, student averaged probably between 2 and 3 correct out of 10. And by Friday on their post-tests, they were averaging between 8 and 10 out of 10 correct. So tremendous growth just in the course of a week as a result of what they were doing through the program. So they also had great results through the other programs, but the Word Wisdom results really jumped out at us. So we just wanted to tell you a little bit about how we surveyed the students. So the first thing that we did was we really walked our students through the standards. They're familiar with them, they're seeing them and hearing about them, but we wanted to make sure that their comprehension of the standards was really clear before they kind of rated these programs based on the standards. So basically in 6th grade we translated for them that you would rate a program, you would give it a 1 if the kids sort of felt like it didn't do a great job of meeting the standard, and then a 4 would be, wow, it did a great job meeting the standard. So let's see. So these are the standards that we sort of translated for the students to make sure that they had that real clarity. Some of the standards and some parts of the survey we actually did in a more guided way, so that we didn't just tell the students what the standards meant, but we sort of explained it and then had the students rate it right there on the spot in the moment, so that they didn't have to retain translation of all those standards all at once. And we found that that was very effective, and it really helped students really give what we felt was a true, honest reflection of their experiences with it. So here are the results of the student survey. Remembering that 1 would be the lowest score and 4 would have been the highest. So you can see that if you look at, there's a 3.6 here for vocab from classical roots was really high. The students really loved how well that particular program helped them focus on and learn about root words and how that helps learn the meaning of new vocabulary words. But what we ended up looking at was kind of overall how well the programs were balanced. So VCR was great in that particular standard, but when we looked at how they came out across the board, Word Wisdom kind of came to the top as being the one that had a good balance throughout all the standards and how the students felt it was effective. So that was kind of what we looked at as a committee when we came together afterwards. Any questions about that? Okay.
Excuse me, sorry. The planning group met again, so that was in June after the results of the student survey. And we had a nice representation of people from 4 of the 5 grade levels. We also had one of our SBI literacy interventionists there. And really the kind of ethic of that meeting was everything is on the table. We can choose one of these programs, we can choose none of these programs. We can choose a hybrid, we can do our own thing. We really wanted to have an open conversation. So we looked at the aggregate data we just saw on the last slide. We also read through some of the qualitative responses students made on other questions of the survey. And really, after I thought a very, very healthy and positive and reflective conversation about vocabulary in the middle school, we decided that Word Wisdom was the program that really deserved to have a full pilot. And so that's really where we ended up deciding, is that taking the results from last year, we wanted to take this Word Wisdom program, which teachers saw some merit in, which the students also did through their survey results, and give it a full pilot for all students grades 4 through 8. So that's what we recommended, with, of course, continued follow-up every 8 weeks during this school year to kind of keep evaluating the program before we make a final decision for beyond 2013-2015.
So here we are. We're at Word Wisdom now. We wanted to explain to you a little bit about what's happening in the classroom with it now. So one thing that is different that we really like about it is that each student book contains these 9 4-week thematic units. The nice thing about that is that students are seeing relationships between the vocabulary words that they're learning and being exposed to. There's a cohesion among it, which helps them, with the learning and the application piece of that. So teachers like that as well. So week 1, students learn, there's an emphasis on context clue strategies. It aligns beautifully with the context clue initiative that we rolled out and implemented last year across all grade levels. So what's really neat is that this year the students are really, grabbing right onto that and running with it. So it's great to see. The second week, the emphasis is on learning the meanings of new words through identifying roots, prefixes, suffixes, affixes. Week 3 is reference skills. So what are other ways that we find the meanings of unknown words? And then week 4 is a review, so it spirals back to a lot of those earlier skills, and they see all those words once again. So it's nice because it spirals, but there's a nice amount of time between that spiraling, which is great. Each lesson begins with an informational text passage, which is wonderful. It's a great way to get some nonfiction text. It's also nice that the students' first exposure to these new vocabulary words is in context, which is, very nicely aligned with the Common Core. Aligns great with our context clue strategies, because right away they're reading the word, they're seeing how it's used, and they're starting to be those word detectives that we're teaching them to be. So the words are defined. They have a dictionary in the back of their student workbook, so that's where they go to look for actual definitions, but that's not the first step. It's not the first place they look, which is great. The consistent strategy for discovering words throughout the program. So there's a sort of, Word Wisdom has this 5-step recipe where first we read, we find where the word is in the passage and we read it. And then we look all around the word. So we look to see if there are other familiar words to us or phrases around the word that might help us start to unlock the meaning of that unknown word. Then we think about background knowledge or schema. And we think about how we can sort of apply what we know to these words that we've sort of pulled out. And then we make an educated guess or a prediction. And then the final step is to check it by going into the dictionary. So the process it's very scaffolded along the way. And we're finding that by the time they get to that prediction step, a lot of them have done a lot of great thinking, and their predictions are oftentimes very, very close to the dictionary definitions. So that makes them feel great about that. So I just kind of went through that. One thing that I do like a bit about these 5 steps for our visual learners, in the Word Wisdom book, there are little pictorial symbols next to each of these clues. So, and then when we first rolled this out this year and started it, we sort of translated what these mean. We put that into kid-friendly language as well. So the read they have a little book icon. So when they see that, they know what strategy they should be using. And then the look is a magnifying glass, think is a light bulb. And then an arrow and a check. So the teacher resource is great. We have pre and post tests provided for each lesson. Unit tests every 4 weeks. So again, it goes back, puts all 30 words together from 3 prior units. Home connections, so we have parent letters and other great resources for communicating with parents and putting tools into parents' hands so they can support their students. And the CD-ROM is just a wonderful, user-friendly, right at our fingertips, great resource.
Okay. In the interest of time, we were going to show you some of the pages, but I think Courtney's explanation gave you a sense of the different parts of the program. We did bring a few books if you wanted to look, but I think we can kind of move to kind of where we are and where we are looking to go with this. So this year, based on the results in June, we had budgeted money for a vocabulary program during the budget process around this time last year, and we used that money not to purchase Wordly Wise, but to purchase Word Wisdom books, and not just for students in grades 6 through 8, but students in grades 4 through 8. We designed as a group at the beginning of the year a pretest that was a consistent form in terms of directions and structure. We took 25 of the words from the first 12 lessons for each grade level, and students had to try to use those words in a sentence, just to give us some baseline data on how well they did. We also put that information into PowerSchool as an ungraded assessment, which is a common and typical practice for us in the language arts department and other departments in the middle school too. And then we'll have that opportunity to then continue with that in the future. So steps still to be done. The vocabulary work group, or planning group, we'll meet after everyone has done 8 weeks of the program, so that would be 2 units. And then we'll see where we are. We'll look at how people are using the program. We'll talk about consistency in terms of the instruction, in terms of the timetable, in terms of what we're seeing from the assessments. Then in 12 weeks after Unit 3, we'll give a post-test the same as the pre-test and see what results, how students were able to retain the ability. Again, our main goal is not just to know those words for the post-test or the unit test, but to be able to use those words correctly in context, building on the context clue work that we did last year and we're continuing to do this year, and also the context clue work in the books themselves. And then once that's happened, this will probably be in January or February, we'll come back together, that planning group, to really decide if this is a program that we think we want to continue with beyond 2014. into the questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Questions?
Yeah, great presentation. Just a quick question. So on that slide where you did the comparison of the three programs and that VCR kind of jumped out a bit higher, you had mentioned that the kids had really liked whatever approach they used. Could you incorporate some of those aspects into this program?
Well, I think that
A little hybrid thing?
this has vocabulary from classical roots was a one-trick pony. It did roots very well. And so the standard that came up is the standard related to roots. So one of the things we liked about Word Wisdom and one of the detractors from VCR was it was going to do this very well, but how are we going to supplement and how are we going to consistently supplement to handle some of the other standards? Whereas in Word Wisdom, every second week is a root and prefix week. And the great thing, as Courtney said, that read, look, think, predict, check strategy is in every lesson, not just the context clue lesson, but they use that strategy again with the root lesson. And so that's why it has that strength. It's just not clearly as obvious as it was to the students in VCR. So we do think that will be addressed, and it's one of the reasons why it was something we really wanted to pilot more fully this year.
George.
I can't remember, did grade 6 take the field test back last year?
Yes.
They did, and so I mean, it'd be interesting to see if there's any feedback for this, they did a pilot, right, so they did actually 8, and 4 all across and see whether, because obviously in 5th year, they were really wise into the CFT, right, to see whether actually they're helpful. I guess my second question would be, you guys, teachers, surveyed this, did you get the same number?
For the teachers?
Yeah.
Well, we did it more through a, we didn't survey ourselves. But
No, I understand, no, I'm just saying whether you had given, Word Wisdom 2.9 for these whole items versus.
I think piloting it in the classroom and having a chance, because I was new in language arts last year, so all of them were new. All 3 programs were new to me last year. And I think what rose to the surface for me was how well Word Wisdom had a balance where it hit all of those standards. I really liked that. And I did love the way classical roots really hit on and emphasized roots, but I didn't feel like it balanced in those other standards. It would have been a lot of work for us to find ways to supplement and give those other standards, equal instructional time. And so that's kind of how I felt about it personally. I just felt it balanced all of the standards, the best of all 3 programs.
And we really, as teachers, were beginning to see the limitations of our previous program Word Realize in the context of the Common Core standards. We were, as teachers, developing a lot of our own pretests. We were developing our own context-based pretests to allow students to test the words. We were just doing a lot to make this program meet the core. And we found that this program really did a lot of those things and did them pretty well, and also offered some consistency in terms of the strategies, the format, so that as kids get more comfortable with it over time, and the idea that a student who begins in grade 4 and it experiences this context clue strategy throughout, it's something they can apply not just in their language arts classes or in their Word Wisdom lessons, but whenever they read a new text. And so it did for us, I think, rise to the top as well. But it really wasn't until we had that full conversation at the planning group that this arose. Coming into the meeting, we had no expectations, but based on the results and our feedback, it really was the one that needed a fuller pilot this year.
So my question is that this is a program. It's a Sanger-Closer program that, it's kind of provided and there's systematic and it has plans for kids. So my big question is really about the students know that this is a time that they're focusing on this, but where's the input that you get eventually from the classroom teachers to know if in fact students are being able to utilize the strategies that you want them to use to be effective learners?
Well,
and I don't know that. That would be a question for me to find out in terms of teaming with teachers. So you take a book and somebody like me might look at this and be like, this is totally abstract. It's a lesson. It's not necessarily embedded in something they're learning, but it's learning opportunity, but it's focused and it's a certain type of context, but it's not necessarily woven into what they're doing every day.
That's right. It's a separate instructional program.
Right.
It's designed to be about 15 minutes a day. As we get more comfortable with the program, some of those things can be moved to more independent work for the students. And I think that's a great question for us to take up in our vocabulary planning group as we move forward.
But I know that you're using some of these strategies in book clubs. I know we've talked with some of the science and social studies teachers about how our students can be using some of these strategies to tackle new vocabulary words in other content areas. So I think we are already starting to spread a little bit, broaden it a little bit more than just that 15-minute lesson a day.
Yep. And Mrs. Ryan and I have discussed kind of putting together a scope and sequence of the 9 context clue strategies at each grade level, plus the routes that are available at each grade level, with the read, look, think, predict, check strategy. Our plan, we talked about sharing it at the November department meeting for LA, and then having the LA teachers bring those back to the team so that everyone is aware of what those things are. And for example, in 7th grade, the first unit was on the life cycle, the living things. And so Mrs. Looney and we shared the book with our team. We talked about it. They looked at the roots in the second lesson, looked at the roots that she was already teaching. And so those connections are available through this program if we really focus on that and make that something, which I think we all want to do.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the district initiatives for many years has been reading across the curriculum. How many years it used to be reading when you were in reading class, when you were reading in language arts class. And you realized that was just, something that wasn't really broad enough. It really wasn't real world application. So it's good to hear that there's partnering, between and among staff to really know that this is just a launching. It's really good to be a more effective learner.
And it's important to note that last year, one of our building SLOs was using context clues to help students with their vocabulary development and reading comprehension. So many of our teachers, including our world language teachers, use context clues as their own SLO. So it's already work that was started last year. And Michael and I have talked about how do we now build these context clues to complement the work that we did last year. And that's part of our conversations as well. So it certainly is something that hasn't done in application last year.
Jen, would like to add something to that?
Just want to add, Andy's brought it up to the next level. We're always talking about, whenever we look at piloting or working with a new program, we always talk about what does this replace, or what is, where does this move us in the direction of our strategic plan, the direction of our building level initiatives. And Mandy was just talking about one of the building level initiatives. But I also want to remind us at this moment that we have a strategic plan strategy 1, which has us looking at all of our programs. And if you think about the way this is being presented tonight, this was piloted, it was research was gathered, it was a thoughtful process. And now I would imagine some next steps would be, not only do we want to talk about horizontal articulation with other programs and reading across the curriculum, but we also want to talk about vertical articulation. How does this support teaching that's going on at Goodwin, and how can the high school look at this and find ways to continue to grow students in the same way when it comes to this particular program? Maybe not exactly the same program, but how can we continue to dovetail?
Kelly.
So I get that this is kind of a package program as well. So I know that when we're looking at the standards, we're talking all the time about differentiation, right? And I understand that it's a spiral, so we'll circle back for maybe the students that don't pick up on the vocab the first time. But what are we doing to differentiate for children that have maybe a higher vocabulary than is presented in the lesson?
That's a great question. In sixth grade, we've actually taken from Wordly Wise a little bit. So things that we did like about Wordly Wise and the way we differentiated up when we had it is applying these words in your own independent way. So writing a story, writing an explanatory essay using the words. It depends on the content of the words, but students going outside of the activities that are within the book and applying that in their own writing in their free time or as supplemental, extra, or different homework. So there's a lot of ways that we can work with that.
We definitely, that's one of the big reasons why the planning group wants to meet, is to really look at differentiation. Because in order to do this pilot with fidelity, we really started each student with the grade level book. except for the most severely disabled students. So we really wanted to see how students would do, both with the weekly lessons and with the 30 words in a unit test at the end of a 4-week cycle. And so all that is going to be part of our discussion. How can we differentiate the program? What kind of things can we put into place so we're differentiating in similar ways across? A lot of our support specialists, both our literacy interventionists and our special ed teachers, are in constant conversation with us about how their students are doing with the program, asking questions, working with us on different modifying of assessments. And so it's a constant conversation, and it's a key part of whether this is a program that we think meets our needs long term.
So I think Karen was hitting on this a little bit, but I'm not sure I completely got answered. So for the VCR program, I understand that for the roots or something that's kind of electric pulling and like the approach to it, and so we felt this program, this package was better overall. But are there any strengths from the VCR program without actually taking the VCR program in terms of how they approach roots that we could apply to that week 2?
Well, I will say this about the VCR program, because we piloted that also in grade 7 for about a 4-week cycle. Kids loved the earlier lessons. A lot of the roots were based around numerals, and it quickly got very difficult. And so one of the things we were really worried about was that students would develop a level of frustration if we did that full time. And when we looked at what the students were being asked to do, it was in many ways more basic in terms of they got the words and the definitions, and then they had some very simple activities. So I feel like in some cases, and this was feedback from some of the parents too, some of the parents felt that the kids liked VCR because they thought it was easier. They were doing less time with vocabulary words. So we can go back and look at that through our planning group to see if there are some elements of that that we can pull through. But our impression was that it really was about what they were being asked to do and how much time it was taking that was helping it kind of rise to the top of it.
I just wanted to share that there's no perfect program. We know that. And especially with the Common Core coming, we've been very hesitant to buy into any program. Hence, looking at multiple programs and looking at as much data as we possibly can. I think our teachers full well know that if something they're using isn't working in a particular area, they have the autonomy to supplement. And having these 3 programs that we're familiar with allows us to do that. The other point I want to make is that the Common Core often gets a bum rap, where you can see how intentional this is and how aligned it is to the Common Core. And the Common Core challenges every content area to have strategies and skills. And we're doing a better job as a district. Hence, this year we're looking at a concept called close reading, which we presented at the community conversation, that we're all looking at these skills and strategies in the same way. And that we are tiering that for students amongst the schools. So although there's no perfect program, I feel confident that we're taking the best program, aligning it to our instruction, and allowing our teachers to supplement as they so see fit.
Any other questions at this point? Yes, one last question.
Sorry, not to
No,
make
no,
you think,
no,
right,
no.
but, so what was, just have a question, what was the feedback from the parents from the word wisdom pilot?
Well, the feedback I got, and I received some emails, I don't know if Courtney, you got any emails directly about the program, but I'll share what my ones that I was addressed on was that one thing is parents didn't like that their students were the guinea pigs and that they were doing 8 weeks here and 4 weeks there and 8 weeks there. So the idea of a consistent program for the year was very appealing to parents. And most of the feedback from parents is they wanted something that was a little more challenging. And so I think that in that sense, it supported the decisions that we came up with as a faculty and also among the results from student surveys, although that wasn't necessarily the students' goal with filling out their surveys, but I think we could see that through their responses in some ways.
Thank you very much. At this point, Jan, you don't need to take any action. It's being piloted now. Books are ordered and everything's on track, right?
We'll see you again at the end of the year.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And we'll do the CMT capped. Actually, are there any other people other than testing involved in that?
Yes.
Okay, then let's do CMT capped.
Can we just pass those books forward if you're all done looking at them? Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Do you have that plugged in or no?
I do. Try it.
I did. It's not working.
Okay.
That's okay.
Well, just give me the wink.
All right, go ahead.
So we have two science building specialists with us this evening. Amber Sherber is going to start off talking about the CAPT results. CAPT is administered in grades 10. And then Mary Looney, our middle school science building specialist, will present the CMT results. In order to give them equal time, I'm just going to ask you to hold your questions to the end, and then they'll both be available to you. Just keep in mind that the science CAPT in CMT is still in place. It has not been replaced by the SBAC assessment, and we're going to continue using the CAPT for the near future. The state is wrestling with some plans to adopt new standards, and they certainly do not have a new assessment available. So Amber, take it away. Just let me know, and I'll forward for you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. This slide will give you a little bit of background on what the science test looks like. So it's asking questions about scientific concepts around 5 different strands. If you hit the button one more time. And these are the 5 strands that it's looking at. So it's looking at energy transformations, chemical structures and properties, global interdependence, cell biochemistry, biotechnology, and genetics, evolution, and biodiversity. So it really kind of takes a broad group of concepts and then narrows it down into 5 different strands. If you hit it one more time. Okay, they asked for scientific inquiry. We're required to embed certain tasks within our classroom through the course of the year, and then they come back and ask specific questions relevant to those concepts or those specific labs within the context of the exam. There's multiple choice questions as well as short answer questions. If you take a look here, this is a graph of the last 7 years of CAP data. So looking at what the science goal range would be, and goal range would be numbers 4 and 5, and the proficiency rate. Proficiency rate would be anybody who's getting a 3, 4, or a 5 over the course of the year. The reason I include this data is so that you can really look at how that data trends over time. So it's important to understand that the CAP test is a different test every year. So if you were to look at the questions that it asks, the questions may shift focus. Okay, so not only are we looking at different cohorts of students every year, but we're also looking at a different exam. Okay, just to kind of put it into a framework. So if we take a look here, this is looking at 2013 data and 2014 data. What I did is I compared state and high school data. So if you look at here, across the board, number of students that are being tested, and then here, number of students being tested and how that reflects in our results. So looking here across the board, could have been that the test itself was a little more difficult this year. The points went down. Okay, here when you look at goal range, again, goal range going back to the number of students up in that 4 and 5 range at that top level. And then you look here, across the board, the state went down, okay, for proficiency, and that would be students at 3, 4, and 5. And Old Saybrook High School went up, okay, which is exciting that we're moving students up into that range, into that proficiency range. Next one. Okay, so right here are some science recommendations. So the color, the ones that are in white were recommendations that we made last year and that we're going to continue to follow through. The ones in green are recommendations that we think that we'd like to incorporate, thank you, this year. So really going back to using a question of the day, bringing up those 9th grade concepts again into that 10th grade class, and looking at, you know, what sort of creating that classroom routine where we're having CAP-like questions on a daily basis. So kids are not getting a mad dash at the end. It's really looking at that consistency piece across the course of a year. The other thing that we would like to continue to do, and the initiative that we've been focusing on, is really close reading and looking at improving that literacy in our general biology classes, with understanding that every student has taken this CAP test in grade 10, and that maybe it's an issue of if I can't read the question, if I can't understand the question, I obviously can't answer the question correctly. Okay, and so really going back and incorporating some of those close reading skills and those exercises throughout the year to build that confidence and to build that ability through the close reading. Okay, this result just kind of broke it down by level. So I mentioned to you earlier that the proficiency would be levels 3, 4, and 5, those students who are reaching that level. And goal being 4 and 5. And so over the course of the year, 127 students tested, 2 students are in level 1, and another 6 students came out at level 2. Understanding, again, all students. So these are students who are outplaced but still meet that 10th grade level and they're being tested, or students in a SAIL program, okay, that may be falling into those categories. Okay, looking here, one more. Oh, no, go back. I didn't go through. That's okay. Back. There we go. Okay, again, just looking at the proficiency here. Okay. Looking here, comparing that 2013 to 2014 data, looking at where we see a gross improvement, this yellow line being the 2014 data and the green line being 2013 data. So although we may have, again, different cohort of students, may have reduced a few in the 4 and 5s, we were moving a bunch of students up into this level 3 area, which is what we were looking for. Okay, looking again across our DIRG, 24 districts, we're still top 10, which is a good place to be. So that's the way we want to look at it. We look at it over the course of the last year. Again, when the state seems to be moving up, we seem to be moving up. So is that reflective of the exam? I don't know. It's a difficult thing to measure every year when you're looking at different cohorts of individuals as well as different exams. So I think for our purposes, are we creating a dynamic program? Absolutely. Are we taking a look and reflecting on what we do as practice in our classrooms? Absolutely. And are we trying to ensure that every student is getting a nice foundation? We are. So that's CAP at the high school.
One thing to mention about the CAP is it was an assessment that was really ahead of its time, where it had embedded tasks, where students were actually taking data, thinking about it, analyzing it, and then coming up with solutions, which is much different than what the CMT has been like. The SBAC is very CAP-like in a lot of ways. Barry.
Yeah. Before I start, I just want to go back to the last presentation that LA did. My slow last year was working with word roots. So we don't work in isolation. We work across all of our subject areas. And to then speak with Amber before when we were waiting to come here to find out that she spends a few days also doing word roots in her anatomy class. So I need you to know that we all work together. We try to take and put everything across all of our curriculum. So those word roots are being done in more than just your LA. It is crucial to the science area as well. Okay, so the CMT is still here with us for science, and as Heston said, we don't know for how much longer it will be here, but until it leaves, we need to still teach to those particular standards. And it goes through those 3 areas of science, the life, the physical, and your earth science. And then it also covers, just like your CAP, your inquiry skills, which deal with, again, taking and looking at different types of experiments, measurement tools that you would use, and doing the embedded task in grades 3 through 8, and then on the CMT, questions regarding basically the skills that are used to design your experiments. So that's basically what the CMT entails. In grade 5, there are 27 standards, and in grade 8, there are 32. So here are our results. On this side of our chart is grade 5. So we had 80% at or above goal this past year, and that is an increase of 6% from the previous year. Just same thing as CAP. It's a new group of students, it's a different test, but again, we see that hopefully we're moving in the right direction. The percent at and above proficiency stayed the same. When we look at grade 8, we had an increase of about 4% for those that are at and above goal, and we went down 1% when we're looking at and above proficiency. So it's that we want to see that general trend of getting our students to that goal and up and beyond. This is just a graphic representation of that data so you can see where our students are, and that whole thing is to continue to move them up. So we didn't have anybody in grade 5 at level 1, and we had a few at level 2, and we want to move those 2s and 3s into 4s and 5s. Here's a comparison of the last 2 years. Again, different set of students, different test. Grade 5 was 4th in the DERG of the 24 schools, and the way we took and looked at that rank was the percent at goal. The percent at goal is what really tells us where our students are. It basically takes and puts the playing field level across all of the different districts versus looking at the, it's not the raw score, it's the scaled score. Thank you, it's the scaled score. So looking at the percent at goal, 80% of our students in grade 5 are at that goal mark, which is fabulous. We ranked 4th. Grade 8, so this is the representation here of grade 8 in a graph style versus in your looking at your numbers. Yep, we have few more students down in level 1. That's something that we need to work hard to, again, work with those students. And there are several students in that level 1 and 2 that are also outplaced. And here's that comparison, how we did from 2013 to 2014. And grade 8 ranks 6th in the DERG with the percent at goal. Here's a representation of the cohort. So the students that took the grade 8 CMT, their scores are there. The same 108 students were still in district, so they could compare that to how they did in 2014. It's really nice to see that growth in those that are at goal and advanced has increased. It's nice to see that trend. So those in white is what I stood here last year and recommended that our department was going to do, and then a follow-up. So indeed, yes, increased skills are now put on all of our assessments, a way to help our students see those increased skills more than just when they're doing an activity. Maybe that was part of that increase we saw in our scores. The benchmark assessments for grades 6 through 8 indeed were created and administered and are done online, so they are mimicking like an SBAC test. The increased online research utilizing online tools and virtual labs, we do that. Of course, the DOK, we have all begun to do that. That's something that will all continue as well as what's above. There was a benchmark that was developed for grades 6 and 8. The benchmark for grades 4 and 5 is something that was tabled to this year. The next one, please. PD time. We were anticipating the release of the standards. They were not released, so that PD time has also been tabled. Planning to build assessments in Inform was a recommendation last year, and that has been done. Professional development and planning, again, that anticipated release, and the state still hasn't given them to us. So it's something that is taking time.
They've set several dates, but yes, those dates have come and gone, and now there is no date.
Right. One thing I do want to mention, when you're looking at Inform, it is something that I was not able to do. It was with the help of Bernadette and her guidance to indeed build that for the science assessment, and then I entered the data. So it was a fabulous partnership between both of us. And this is what we hope to accomplish this year.
So Bernadette is our instructional data specialist that assists all the content areas with their data, loading into Inform, and then analyzing that so that we can make curricular changes.
So for this coming year, we would like to create and administer benchmark in grades 4 and 5 using the same Discovery Ed online program. Grade 3 also does a performance assessment. We would like to also get that now into Inform. We would like to see what we can do to increase instructional time for science. We are looking at scheduling, and it's something that we would love to see if we can increase. And we are visiting with other schools to see what they do in their science courses, their science time. So we are meeting on November 4th with a group down in Westbrook. So that's part of the conversation that we will have with some other districts. And a directive that has come from the state is to begin to incorporate pre-K through 12 engineering concepts. So that is something that we have begun and we will continue to do throughout the year. Come on up, Amber. We don't have any questions here.
Excellent questions on the Board of Education. CMP. Yes.
Not so much, I guess, a question, but I just want to say fabulous presentation, but from the high school perspective, when initially your slide was very sophisticated in terms of what students really need to know. And so my question was really taking a look at students' opportunity to take the coursework based on their ability and then be able to know how they can be assessed. Because that's a challenge, you know, the sophistication of the tests and your ability. And so if you can't necessarily take those classes, you might not really be on account. I don't know, it's just a thought.
So
I'm not quite sure.
Oh.
I
I think
I'm
I
not sure
understand
the-
what you're saying, Eileen. All of the standards are taught that are on that, are taught to all of the students. So those are the standards, those are the questions that will be on
Are
the
you
capped exam.
Specifically the strands that we're addressing? Is that what you're addressing?
Whatever your
Yes,
initial
so those
thought.
strands, yes. So those are addressed through the
Yes,
course, right.
yes.
So by the time that they've gotten to grade 10, they will have seen those strands. And they will have experienced them within the context of the middle school and then into their,
So regardless if
start.
you're taking a general.
That's right, that's
you know,
right.
biology, because not everybody takes biology, you know, or general science, because even in the high school, there's still that fork.
Right, but
So,
most kids will, if you're taking earth science in the middle school, then you'll take biology as a freshman. If you're
I understand
taking,
there's still
right,
that-
physical science, then you're taking earth science as a freshman, and you will be ensconced in biology in 10th grade. And so you will be having those strands, you'll be experiencing those strands prior to taking that exam. Whether you're taking a general class or a CP class.
No, I understand.
And
I
they
just-
embed specific tasks purposely because that is content that is assessed on the test. So,
Regardless of the level that you're at.
correct.
That's right.
Just putting
That's
it-
right. And we're just trying to address those literacy pieces in order to ensure that everybody is having a similar experience.
And-
Other questions?
I was gonna say, in the department spirals.
Right.
So, you know, we do evolution, we do heredity, we do cells in the middle school, and then
We do it again.
they do it again and
Bring it
build
up
on
at
it more.
another level and a different depth.
Mhm.
Yep.
George?
So in the middle school, I assume at this point, you still have two different science courses, either earth science or the physical sciences. Do you find that the students actually perform comparably in the CAP, or they actually differently?
We found that they do perform comparably, that they are having that skill set. They are getting the information they need in order to see success on the CAP in 10th grade, even if they're coming out of the middle school having already taken earth science.
Actually, we removed the 8th grade one, the test, right, so that's the.
Oh, the
year
10th grade
before.
test.
So looking at the earth science students, the majority usually score 5. And we usually have a handful, so if there's a class of 24, I'm going to say usually when I do my statistics, and I can go back and get that for you. But when I say the majority, I'm going to say like 18 out of the 24. I look at that data.
Kelly?
So on the recommendations for the high school for the counts, it states that the strand that we didn't perform as well in is the fourth strand, which is
Oh,
the.
okay. I'm glad that you mentioned that because you'll notice that that's no longer in this slide. I went back and I looked at the data. And when I took a cursory look at the data, it did appear that there was a drop. So when I graphed the data, it appeared to be a drop. And when I went back and I looked collectively at the numbers, the difference was negligible across the board per strand. So I went back and I looked over the last 3 years of data to see if maybe I had misstepped something. And the reason that I took it out is because it's not. It's consistent across, all 5 strands have been consistent for the last 3 years. So if we're consistently, getting 11s and 12s out of that 15 bar, then there wasn't one particular strand that I thought we should recycle back. So I was a little premature in putting that in.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Why don't we stay in the new business, and then we've got the initial presentation of proposal for the building and the windows and middle school and roof project, Oak Park Architects.
No worries. Thank you.
right.
As you know, next have with us from Oak Park architects, Peter Chow and Laura Donadio. They are the architects who have been awarded the bid to do the work for the Goodwin window project and the middle school roof project, both of which are slated to begin around the close of the academic year this year. But of course, there's a lot to do between here and there. We're going to have work actually begin then. And the initial steps are right here in front of you, and that is the presentation that you and Laura are going to give you tonight. We thank you for your patience.
Well, it's going to be a tough act to follow here. So, change of pace. So, I just want to give you a quick update on the two projects. For the roof project, we have done all our investigation work. So we have actually gone up to the roof, documented everything. We brought a testing company to come up and look at what's actually the composition of the existing roof. And we have actually drawn all that condition up to this point. We are going to be meeting with another roofer this Friday. What we are looking for this particular roofer is to advise us about some of the details that's going to go into the new roof. Advise us a little bit on, quite frankly, making sure that what we're drawing is actually work and buildable. And I think that we'd like to get someone like that, a roofer who actually do large commercial roofs that works in the field so that we get actual feedback from them. And we're also looking for this particular roofer to give us a fairly accurate estimate, a budget of what this project would cost. So again, they're the people who's been bidding these projects. They know what the climate's like. They know what the labor is going to be like and so forth. So that's where we are right now. On the window project, we have been working on some ideas, and a couple of weeks ago we had a chance to meet with some of the teachers in the elementary school and gone over some of the ideas. But also, in the meantime, what we have done is that we have, again, documented everything that we can document of the existing conditions. And we have talked to a window company, True Enterprise, who's I believe, Mr. True actually is a town resident. Yeah, right. All right. So, and he has given us some help on some budget numbers, just not for the entire school at this point, but really for sort of the classroom portion. So we kind of have an idea where we're heading on. We've spoken to other contractors and masons and so forth. So we're now in the process of pulling together the information, and again, working almost parallel to the roof project and try to essentially get these two projects out to bid at the end of January, beginning of February. That's our target, so that we can receive bids back in March and get contractors on board March, 1st of April. So plenty of time to order material, plenty of time for them to set up. Because really, these projects, what's going to happen is that as soon as school's out, they need to start working, and particularly on projects like window, where it takes a long time to get them. Usually commercial windows, they're custom made, so they take 6-8 weeks to get. So we really got to get these people on board several months before, so that they can get their submitted information to us, so we can approve what they're planning on doing, so we can get that starting to fabricate. So that's our target at this point, and so right now, what we really want to do is kind of give you a little presentation about our thoughts on the window project and what our proposals are. As all of you know, Goodwin School, there are four classroom wings, and all the classroom exterior are basically the same. They're what is essentially a entire wall made up of framing, aluminum framing, with again a window in the middle and a panel on top and a panel on the bottom. So that's basically what the classroom wings are. The rest of the school, like the office, the nurse's office, the library, they are windows that's in a masonry one, a brick and block, concrete block wall. So just to sort of make this very straightforward is that we plan on taking those windows, the ones that's in an existing brick and block wall, and taking them out and replacing the windows very much in the same kind of configuration as they have now, but obviously with proper windows, with proper insulation, and so forth. In the classroom wing, however, what we really end up having to do is remove the entire wall. So basically take out everything and then start, basically rebuild the exterior wall for all intents and purposes. So what we've looked at are a couple of options. One is that, and that's really based on the experience that we had doing a very similar project at the LA Middle School in Clinton in summer 2013. We're taking one wing of the school, removing the wall, and replacing, similarly, design and replacing essentially all the exterior walls. And we went through a couple of scenarios and looking at replacing the walls in kind. In other words, windows, panels, top and bottom, exactly the way it was designed, just new material, better material, and so forth, versus doing things differently, which would be essentially building a new wall and then putting windows in those walls. And we found that replacing the wall in kind was more expensive. That was coming from window manufacturers. And we also find that we were not able to get as good an insulated wall as if you were to build a wall and then put windows in it. Because you can actually build a wall and get R21 out of it. You can't do that on sort of a window wall system without really making the insulating panel extremely thick and heavy, and that adds cost to the project. So we ended up doing in that school, and we're looking at doing it this way, is to take the same amount of window area, but distributing it a little bit, so that what we have done is that taking the window and making the window taller, because right now those windows starts at about 2'6", and the head of the window is about 7 feet. So it's at the head of the door, just about the head of the door. The classroom is about 9-foot ceiling. So our thinking is to make these windows start at 2'6" and go up to 9 feet to make the windows taller, so that we could reduce the amount of windows horizontally and just sort of concentrate it in putting the windows in the center. What that really does is that we're actually creating just about the same amount of window area, but we're creating a wall that, in our opinion, is a much more comfortable wall because the walls are much better insulated, and also give the classroom a little bit more wall surface to work with. And I think that we found that as we walked through all the schools is that there's never enough wall surface. So in classrooms. And also the other thing is that we feel that by building a wall and then putting window into it, we're able to build a wall that's much more durable than just sort of a glass window, aluminum frame type of wall. And we also think that from the standpoint of construction timing, I think this is sort of a way to making sure we can get this project done in time. Mostly because just imagine if these curtain walls takes 6 or 8 weeks to fabricate. It means they don't really arrive to the school until end of July. Okay, then you start construction. Whereas in our last experience in LA school, what they did was by the time the windows arrived, all these walls are constructed. And just basically put the windows in. So there's a process in which we were able to get this project going on from day one all the way through to the end without sort of waiting to the very end and having sort of big rush.
And having the wall in will allow us to work on the heating system as well.
Yeah.
So instead of waiting for this whole window wall to be placed in and then working on the HVAC system, we can do a little bit of that as we're both building.
As you know, there's a heating unit that's behind one of these panels, and in removing the exterior panel, that unit itself is going to be removed, and we're replacing those units with new, more efficient units. So again, they won't be able to do any work, as Laurie pointed out, that if we wait until the walls to come in before they can install the panel. So we're waiting. Basically, if we did it this way, we found that in the previous experience, if we were doing it that way, we would have truncated the entire summer into about 3 or 4 weeks at the end to try to get all this done. And we just don't think we can do that just physically. So besides the fact that we feel that by creating a wall and then inserting windows in it, it gives additional benefits such as making the wall just that much better. We can build that much better wall in terms of insulation, in terms of comfort, and so forth. Plus, with our design of putting what's essentially a transom window on top on the last 2 feet of the space, we are looking at, and Laurie talked a little bit about it, we're looking at how that will change the daylighting in the classroom itself, and we think that it's a better daylighting scheme for these classrooms.
So I have a diagram of kind of sun angles for the, so here you have December and here you have June, so it's like the solstice time, so.
You're south facing, right?
South facing, so this is kind of the worst case scenario, the most extreme scenario. And on the top we have your existing condition, and the sun angles are coming through, and you can see where in yellow the light would be in the classroom. In the winter it comes pretty far in. Down here, however, we're looking at adding that transom up above. And so it's particularly in the summer, you'll have indirect light. This lighter area is indirect light. It'll brighten up the room, the light will come further in. It'll help make the room feel taller.
What's happened is that the existing school actually have this little overhang that's naturally built in. And it works really nicely with the sun angle because with the addition of this panel of glass up top, most of that glass is being shaded by this overhang. So you're getting natural light coming in, but shaded natural light. Whereas with it being a panel up top, you're really just getting the direct sunlight coming in on the bottom. So we're getting actually a little bit more light coming into the building with that additional transom glass on the top.
Yeah, and less direct light where you can have, more use of that space, the bright light, have lights off, and use more efficiently what is natural output for light.
And then I think this overhang does is that because it shades the direct sunlight coming in, we also found that as we were walking through the school, a lot of the blinds were drawn partially, at least 50% down to just block out the sunlight coming in. With the natural overhang, that upper glass can be left unshaded and still be able to get natural light coming in. So you're really getting up the benefit of a lot more natural light by having the transom window up top. In the wintertime, because we do have the transom up top and because of the sun angle, the sun is actually be able to reach much deeper into the room, so you're really getting a lot more daylight to the back of the room. So the room itself will get actually much more daylight. Really the thing about room is that it's not so much the brightness of the area next to the glass, it's actually too bright most of the time. It's really in the back of the room towards the corridor. You really want to get some light, natural light back there. And by having the transom window up high, we're able to kind of allow some of the light to get a little bit deeper into the room.
And your hallways have like a transom up above, so you're also going to be sharing that light into the hallway and getting that into those spaces as well.
So with that in mind, that's why that's why we're making the proposal and making recommendation of not having sort of a horizontal strip of window, but to group the window together, make them taller, to allow better lighting coming in, to create some additional wall spaces on the side on the side of the front of the building, and also making the wall a little bit warmer in the winter because it's better insulated, and a little bit cooler in the summer because again it's better insulated. And the other thing that we're looking at is to be able to use on the exterior of the building, we'll be able to use masonry on the exterior of the building so that it's perhaps a little bit more in keeping with the rest of the town and with the school itself. And right now we've sort of done a couple of rendering or sketches to sort of indicate to you that, you know, with masonry it is possible to have some colors in the building. Because as you know, that building is sort of a beigey white brick that's kind of dirty at this point, unfortunately. And so we feel that it's possible to be able to have some masonry that will be able to have some color involved. Now we picked blue only because blue is in the school right now, but again, it's not necessary that's what we want to do as a color for the window, nor is it what we want to do to sort of put a brown masonry. So this masonry is, what we're looking to do is, this masonry is a score concrete block. So it has sort of an 8x8 appearance, very similar to what is now in the middle school. So it will give you, again, a certain level of looks that is tying in some of the schools together. So right now what we're looking to do is we still continue gathering information from some contractors about various components, cost of components. We're going to try to soon to give the window folks some of the layout of the rest of the window, like in the office, in the cafeteria, and so forth, so we can get a really accurate budget as to what the window units themselves cost. And I've been talking to a mason, so we can get a pretty good idea of what the masonry would cost. We talked to Westbrook Block, which would be probably one of the main supply of these blocks, so we know what that costs. So we're trying to, at this point, gathering a lot of information, try to get these construction costs and so forth as tight, as accurate as possible, so that when we finish the documentations and finish the budget, hopefully everything will kind of work nicely and flow nicely.
Peter, can you just talk a little bit about the two renderings you have there showing the two options that...
Okay. So we had looked at the as you know, all the classrooms have doors directly to the outside in that school. And we had looked at the building code, and we decided that, with the exception of the pre-K classrooms, there are 4 classrooms pre-K at the end of one wing. The classrooms don't really need doors directly to the outside. So we had looked at 2 possibilities. One is to have a layout retaining the door directly to the outside. Now the door has to kind of be where it is shown. It's not centered on the whole thing, only because right now there's a curve where these walls are sitting on, and the door sort of a little lower. So we really couldn't change this. So the door needs to stay where currently the door is. So That's one option that we're looking at. And another option is that we found that since we don't need doors in most of the classrooms, a possibility is not to have them, but just have windows comparable width to the door so that you basically get the same amount of glass, if you will. We're kind of looking at right now the budget, and to some extent, to be quite honest with you, will inform us, how much certain things will cost. We do know that the scheme with the door does cost a little bit more than the door, because essentially this scheme we have 2 large windows, and this one we have 2 large windows and a door. So we do know that with the door scheme it will cost a little bit more, but we don't know the totality of the whole thing yet. We don't know what the cost of this whole design. We know the cost of this whole design, but we don't know what the cost of the gym window, we don't know what the cost of the cafeteria window, etc. And we don't know the cost of the changing out the heating unit in the back just yet. We're getting these data. So until we get it all put together, we need to look at that before we make some final decision with Jane.
So the great unknown there of the dollars being associated with, will there be enough dollars if we want to put it through, but also when we met with the teachers at Goodwin, we invited all teachers, and I think we had 6 come to a meeting in the afternoon, and they spoke favorably about having the doors in the classroom. They liked having them. Peter's talking about how the door cannot be moved, and it really it's a fixed fixture because of the lift, right?
The lift.
way that it goes out into. So in other words, if the 2 scenarios that you see there are probably the 2 scenarios that we'd be working with, either with the doors or without the doors. We're also having conversations about safety and security, and so far, I don't know that we've got a definitive answer on that. I know I didn't personally get a definitive answer from the chief, and I know that in talking with other people, not our chief, but other people involved in security, there really isn't a yay or nay on classroom doors for security when children are in school. Obviously, for security purposes, the fewer entrances and exits you have in a building when you're locking it up and securing it for the evening, the better off you are. But is it better to have a door that people can get out of, thinking that there's someone inside? Or is it better to have things closed up so that people can't get inside? Either way, I think it's important to say too that those windows slide this way, and people needing to exit in an emergency would be able to exit out the windows.
Yes.
So I was thinking,
yeah.
Julie, is there anything else, Peter, Lori, Julie, that I didn't capture either about the conversation with the teachers or in our discussions that we had about doors, no doors, sliding windows, the casement window concept, just considering that your heating and air conditioning units are there, that's not going to work unless you're very tall and very strong.
No, I think that, you represented what the teacher's preference was for sure. It does unfortunately sometimes come down to dollars and cents. We do know that we can look at both projects together, and so the budgets can be refined. We do have the ability to adjust those budgets with the state as long as we don't exceed the bond issue. So, there's some flexibility within the 2 projects, which is helpful. And I think that the most exciting piece of the whole conversation is that when you approved the building application and I filed it with the state, we did file this as an energy conservation project, and we did receive a letter back from the state confirming that it would be considered an energy conservation project. And so what does that mean? It means that our initial estimate of approximately $50,000 reimbursement for this project is more like $400,000. So we'll be getting a lot more money back on this project than we had initially anticipated as a code compliance project. And so that's
great.
It's really
down
good.
to price of glass and
Yeah.
price of masonry.
It doesn't mean we can
safety,
spend more.
security, and
Right. Doesn't mean we can spend more, but it's good news for the town.
I think to some extent, with Dr. and what Julie said, to some extent, it's all the more important that we make sure that these walls kind of meet current energy code. I think that's important. Current energy code does call for exterior wall solid wall to be R21. So it's all the more important that we do that. The other thing is that that's the reason why we also are right now very vigilant in sort of talking to people at the trade, talking to people who are actually selling these products, people who are supplying these products, to really get a good, accurate number of products and labor costs and so forth, because we know that we can, if there's savings on the roof, we can transfer some of that savings and use it over here. This is over budget and so forth. So it's important that we're going to continue on and kind of refine numbers at this point.
I think another thing about numbers that we didn't talk about when we talked about in the meeting is that this wall, on the other side, there are shelves, bookshelves. The heating unit is integral with those bookshelves, but they are also part of the window wall. And that will need to come out when the wall comes out. So those will need to be replaced as well. And that's part of, what we're looking at in budgeting as well.
Sheila, did we address your point?
Pardon me?
Did you get your point addressed where your hand was up a moment ago?
Well, I'm assuming that this isn't enough time for me to have any input, but I am very appreciative of the fact that Jan did say that she and Julie will be coming back to the school to meet with teachers, because they're very anxious to share and to learn more about it. I think that they're really very invested, so Jan did share with me that she'd be doing that, so that would probably be a more appropriate
Okay,
time.
perfect, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the Board of Education for this preliminary review? George?
Sure. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I was under the impression that a state grant paid for a door.
I paid for one, a portion of an egress, most likely being the door, under a code compliance project. But because it's an energy conservation project, it changed that picture a little bit.
That's right. And there's several categories. I think that Julie's right. If you need to put this project in the right category, essentially, and energy conservation is the way to go.
I just have one follow-up question. I assume you can't get both the egress money and the.
No.
That's
No.
our maximum reimbursement,
Okay, just let me try.
28.7%. We got as much as we could.
It is assumed that if you're going to do this, it will be egress.
Right.
All right.
I was going to say, I'm not an architect, but you're absolutely right that the heating unit is right here by the windows. So that'll take into consideration what's going to come forth in terms of how you address that.
Oh, you mean the air conditioner?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
okay.
if those come, yeah, I mean, that's a big deal.
There's a heating ventilation. Yeah, there's a heating ventilation unit. It's actually right here.
Yeah.
So
Big classroom.
most of these units, I think New England Mechanical had looked at it. A lot of these units need to be replaced anyway. So, as part of this project, we're going to replace these units. And we are, to some extent, because of the construction of the existing wall, we're forced to replace them whether we like it or not, because once we rip them out, that unit falls down.
And what's there now is not only that unit, but there's a thin tube radiation that runs along the wall that's kind of hidden behind the shelves. And talking to the engineer, the efficiency of this wall would mean that we don't need that. So you're actually going to have less kind of mechanical system in there. You'll just have the one unit heater in each room.
And you all know that these units are quite old, so they'll be a lot more energy efficient and a lot more, they'll have a lot of features that we don't have now. And not that it's anytime soon, but they will more than likely be designed with the ability down the road, way down the road probably, for air conditioning. There'll be a unit that would adapt ultimately for that.
All right. Is that enough questions and answers at this point? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Appreciate it. Thank you. The only other item of business that we'll touch is the audio recording and board member remote participation in meetings. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. All right, we'll go back up and down. So the audio recording, as you know, the Board of Education is very interested in making sure that there's a lot of access to the community in terms of our proceedings, and so we began to speak last spring about videotaping, audio recording, otherwise our meetings. Right now, we're settled on, at least as an interim step, the audio recording, and as you can see, we have, as a stopgap, put microphones around the room, and the meeting is being audio recorded at this point to be, at some point, Jan will help us figure out with the IT people how it's going to be stored and how it could possibly be accessed. But when we actually got the WebEx system in place, which addresses the convergence of the two issues, one is community access to our meeting proceedings, as well as the ability for board members to access the meetings remotely, we'll have a better technology than what's in the room right now. So Jan, did we want to take some action on a specific proposal at this point? Because I think at the last meeting we had asked you all to get some numbers and come back to us with a proposal, which is probably great.
Yep, that's exactly what you have in front of you. So the pricing that was pulled together by IT is for a webcam and all the equipment needed to video and audio record meetings, which is a total of $2,300. There's an annual subscription fee associated with the technology. And after considering additional remote users, which this board asked us to do, so that this could also be used for professional development opportunities and some other opportunities, it would be 25 total, and 4 host sites, as well as 1,200 minutes per month and 1 gig of storage for recording meetings. The annual fee is a little over $3,000, $3,060. That's the final package that we put together based on all of the questions and recommendations that this board had. My understanding is that the number of minutes per month can be changed. Should we need more, we can always, kind of like with your phone service, you can always get more minutes should you want them. There's no charge to record our meetings on site up to 1 gig of storage, and we can convert the recordings and post the meetings on the website. And I think what I've seen done typically in other districts that do this is they post the meeting, it's up there for a period of time, it comes down, and another meeting goes up. So maybe 1 or 2 meetings at any one time are available on the website. And I'm not sure if there's an archiving capability, but at least that allows people who want to participate in the meeting but can't make it to the meeting at this time to watch it whenever they want, rather than local cable access, which would give us certain times, and has a certain value to it too. But this would be, you can sit having your cup of coffee on Saturday morning and watch board meetings.
Well, I think the on-demand
I don't think they'll do that.
The on-demand feature is actually one of the best features. We don't have to wait
It'll be on
for
YouTube,
the
it's free.
public access loop
Right.
There forever.
where Board of Education comes up. It's like when you want to watch the Board of Education.
You'll get it, yeah.
You can watch it.
This is obviously, this is separate when it says remote participation. This is a different point of view in terms of if you're away and want to participate in the meeting. That's
Yeah,
a different,
yeah, that's a
I'm
good
just saying,
part of it.
because that's a.
And that can be done by phone or by computer, very convenient.
And the other thing that Jan just mentioned, which is very good, is we've been here for almost 3 hours already, but if it's on demand on the website, rather than waiting for 3 hours because you wanted to hear this part of the meeting, you could actually fast forward it on the web and just watch that part of the meeting that you care to watch. So there are a lot of advantages to the board capturing this information this way and posting it on the internet so that the citizens have the most convenient access to our proceedings.
So is that how administrators will participate too then?
With a cup of coffee on Saturday morning? No.
Just former.
Just former.
With your picture in the background, facing it. Question for you,
Yeah.
The 1 gigabyte storage, is that enough to store more even one of these users?
Yeah, I believe so.
We had asked IT to look into that. The
Yeah.
idea that we wanted to be able to have a recording and knowing our meetings can be 4 and 5 hours long at different times. And that's what I believe the report back was from IT.
Right.
We'll double check that before we move forward, but the idea.
We can start there, sort of start with this plan. It's not the base plan, it's not the Rolls Royce, it's sort of an in-between, and then we can adjust accordingly if we find that we are or aren't using.
Just ask what
Right.
a gig would record.
Well, do you know
But a
this
4-hour
video?
meeting.
It's about 10 hours
Yeah.
of
Thank you, Jill.
10
video
hours of
recording.
video
Again?
recording is
Okay.
one gig.
Based on the.
So typically.
Resolutions?
you probably put the
That's
month
what, that's what
worth
Webex
of
gave us,
meetings.
and gave us a resolution. I don't have it in front of me.
If we get into the habit of saying that the last 2 meetings are posted, we probably wouldn't have any problem covering them. Or we could decide that we're gonna post, one, and it's up for, until the next one, then the next one goes up. Because those would not be our official minutes. We have official minutes, that's completely separate.
Right, we don't have the same records retention issue with the video, that's a matter of convenience. Minutes are the actual records that have to be recorded. And to Eileen's point, the other aspect of this system is that board members can participate remotely in a variety of devices and fulfill the legal obligation that we have, that everybody be heard and all that, so. All right, so at this point, it looks like is it a $5,300 allocation that you're asking for specifically for those 2 components? And you're asking us to approve the approach, the WebEx approach to recording of board meetings and board members' remote participation in meetings. So can I have a motion to approve the WebEx-based proposal for the recording of board meetings and remote participation of board members in meetings? And the amount of money is $5,300, moved by Eileen, seconded by Phil. Is there any discussion on the motion?
That money represents the cost of the equipment plus 1 year of service.
Correct. Right.
So the following year is going to be
30.
It will do whatever the annual fee is that year.
Might go down to the technology on the business.
You want to use it next year? For $3,300 next year?
It will be
Budget.
included as part of our
Yeah, if
budget.
you bring it forward as part of your budget, then
We'll
you'll
have
have to
to
do
do
it.
it.
All right, do you want to, before we take the motion, you want to just build in, at least informally here, some sort of a feedback mechanism, and we evaluate this in some way, the effectiveness of it. So for example, you talked about how many citizens actually hit. You can look at, unique hits on the website to actually view and how long people are viewing. You want to get any stats on that, and you know if that's possible?
I'm not sure if it's possible with our current website.
Why don't we look into that? I mean, I think we're all gonna do it because we might, but let's think about ways to evaluate the usefulness of it.
Well, the initial, if you recall, the initial idea behind WebEx was really for the conferencing piece.
Right.
We then expanded it for this
Right.
audio
Right, 2 birds with a stone.
recording and possible video recording. So that's sort of an add-on.
We can find out if that's possible.
But we'll find out,
yeah.
If not,
Just
we'll
ask the
survey
question.
in other ways.
So the motion and second is to approve the plan as it was presented and allocate the $5,300 that's being requested for this. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye, are there any opposed? All right, very good, thank you very much, and especially to the staff, and thank the IT staff also for their good research efforts there, Vito.
If you're looking for a volunteer, to just test the system.
Yeah.
I would volunteer to stay home the next meeting and listen. To see if it
That's
works.
not funny.
I gotta tell you, man, you're
Really,
you're
you
very
really
good.
couldn't really, I don't know about that.
I like the way you work.
I'm sure it works.
All right, Public Relations Committee recommendations for an official logo.
We formed this year, as you know, a public relations committee, and we did some low-hanging fruit first. We addressed something that we felt could be easily addressed, and something that the committee could come together on and begin our process, and that was finding our identity, our brand, by gathering all of the letterhead and communiques from different schools and the Board of Education and central office. Here's what we found. We don't have one identity in this district. We have lots of different lighthouses, we have brands, we have different logos, different ways of, different fonts, and we wanted to create something for our new website and also for our letterhead that automatically identifies us as Old Saybrook Public Schools, one united group, not separate schools, not separate entities. Eileen Baker, Holly King are on this committee, Mandy Ryan's on it, Matt Walton. So we're pretty well represented here tonight. And we basically just put everything out on the table and said, who are we? And what the committee voted on finally was the Inner Light Lighthouse, which is on the Board of Education letterhead at this time. But then we added the Old Saybrook Public Schools in blue over the black lighthouse in a particular font chosen by our art teachers, Optima. And as it turns out, it translates pretty well to a website font that's very similar. It was chosen, I think, because of its almost calligraphic kind of style. It has fat and slender components to it. The inner light has been associated with the school district, but so has the outer light. The reason why we chose the inner light is because other departments in town use the outer light pretty extensively, and we wanted to be unique. And of course, the lighthouse has so much symbolic meaning when you're talking about education and light. It's Yale, I believe, is Lux et Veritas, light and truth. So I think that kind of goes with a school and board of education. So in short, the logo is that, what you see up there, blue writing as it is now, the black lighthouse as it is on some of our letterhead now, the Optima font, and the other thing that we wanted to do, and I think, Mr. Sutton, it's at maybe the next one, we're gonna have a RAM watermark for some of our letterhead. Obviously, there's certain documents that the RAM watermark may not be appropriate, but there are some that would. Something coming out of the athletic department, an award, a letter of congratulations, the RAM, we are associated with the RAM, and of course, the type would go over that. And then at the bottom, our mission statement appears. At this time, our mission statement doesn't appear on all of our letterhead, and we'd like it to be there as it is in other places too, as even on the front of our website. These are things that the committee felt were most closely identified with us, best represented us. And as I said, we did this first for two reasons. It was a fun and a symbolic activity to get the committee started, and secondly, it was really very much needed and very timely for our website. So we're just looking to present this to you this evening. I don't know, Eileen, Holly, Mandy, Matt, is there anything else that we want to say about it?
There was just a lot of discussion about it. People were really invested, but
right,
the decision was collaborative, and here we are.
Yeah, George.
Is that lighthouse still for the property?
Is it still what?
Public property?
One of them is still federally owned, I believe. I think it might be the inner light. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It should be weird to have a private house.
Yes, I think I think I just read recently that's still federally owned.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that though. We'll look into it. The RAM, by the way, is ours. That was drawn by an art teacher at the high school. And he said he just took a bunch of pictures of rams and drew his own, and so that we know is ours.
Any other questions about the branding project, the logo, the official logo that's being proposed, as well as the RAM that would be watermarked on certain documents, etc.? Any questions about any of this? Well, all looks good to me. Branding is very important, and I think that you've done a great job, the committee's done a great job, so. All right, we've jumped around the agenda so much, I just want to make sure that I haven't missed anything, and I don't think I have at this point. So are there any comments or questions regarding the reports from the administrators? And again, the administrators are not required to give a report, but certainly if you wanted to highlight something, we'll just go quickly. Holly first.
I just wanted to say thank you, Mandy, for bringing back the 8th grade water rafting. I'm so disappointed my daughter didn't get an opportunity to do that, but I think it's awesome. I hope it continues.
That was the one caveat to the request, is that if we do it this year, we must do it every year.
My daughter did, and it was absolutely
Yeah, I'm
fantastic.
so jealous. I just wanted to mention, just I was curious, and I know it's late, so I'm sorry, but they said in high school there was a conversation about safety of the turf field, and I think that's because it's artificial. It was one of, maybe on the parent advisory, they had some
That was
concerns.
one of the questions
And that
that
had
came
come,
up with parents.
I sort of heard about it, and I was hoping, because I'm not familiar with artificial turf, so they said some of the injuries or, I don't know, some of the people.
I have a couple of issues, and actually the engineers were prepared to speak about this tonight because I thought it might
I was
come up.
gonna raise it.
There was, or we were originally proposing a turf field. There were a number of citizens who asked questions about increased number of injuries, knee injuries in particular because of turf. And there were plenty of reports on both sides of that some felt that there were more and some felt that there were less. And in talking to athletes who play on them or have played on them in the past, they felt that they were easier to play on because it's more of a level field. It has fewer divots in it. The other issue though that came up recently, but it's not a new issue, is that recently there was a report that got a lot of press about carcinogens in the pellets, in the rubberized pellets in the turf field. That's not new information. There were, again, studies that we found on both sides of that issue. Some saying that there was a possible concern, and some saying there weren't. The engineers had brought tonight, and they have forwarded to me via email, but I haven't read it yet. The same turf association that helped them set their specs has a response to that and a longitudinal study. I did ask them though, when we get to the point where we're talking about the pellets that we're going to be using, that we get sort of an MSDS sheet, a chemical makeup sheet for what those pellets are. There are a number of choices on pellets, so that conversation will be had along the way.
Second for attention, I thought, okay, so
Yeah.
just straight it.
Thanks.
A quick
Yeah.
point, our secretary is pointing out to us that we have a mandatory stop time at 10:30. I'm going to use the official clock up there. If we don't vote to extend the meeting, so let's see if we have a couple more questions on the reports. Eileen, make it quick,
Yeah, I just
please.
wanted to say to Mandy, thank you for doing the anti-bullying, because actually that come up to, on the Board of Education agenda for policy and getting kids to really be aware
Let's
of
do
it.
questions,
So
if
that's
there are
just-
any questions.
But that's something that people wouldn't even know about if you didn't read it.
This is the kindergarten. So in your report, you had two students from St. John who were referred. So we have to do the question whether those two would benefit from the unified schools.
Well, that's part of, there was a new law about 4 years ago that any student who is in a school in Old Saybrook, we have obligations under Child Find and to provide any kind of special ed consultation and services, and they get a part of our grant, so that's part of that. As Jan said, I don't know the answer to the unified sports question, so I will look into that.
Any other questions for any of the administrators or the superintendent at this point on their reports? What you may.
This was the Sheila Riddle for the AP Med Scholars. National merit, so AP.
They're not the national merit. There's another level of recognition which does not qualify students for a scholarship, so that's the tremendous scholarship.
But the national merit is
Part of that, yes, taking PSATs and using it, yeah, we have 5 students in this class.
Are there any other questions? Are there any reports from our various board committees and liaisons, other than having you read through the list right now?
Just a monthly synopsis of the Learn meeting on October 9th. I've been attending the Learn monthly meetings, and I get a monthly synopsis, which I'm going to pass on.
We could pass on to the superintendent, so
Yes.
thank you very much. Any other reports, Eileen?
Legislator and I are trying to meet to review some of the legislative changes that the policy committee may end up using an alternate Tuesday night, possibly just because it's
That's fine. Thank you very much. Anything else? May I have a motion to adjourn? Karen, seconded by Kelly. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.